Chapter 557. In the vast training ground, the tens of thousands of spectating heavenly deities were completely silent. It was so silent that it was terrifying. However, after a short moment of silence, there was a tide of discussion. Some talked about Dong Ho, while others talked about Qin Yu becoming the Misty Mystic Palace's palace master. "Quiet," Huang Fu Lai Jun said coldly. His voice reverberated through the entire martial arts practice field. All the Divine Realm experts very consciously quieted down and looked towards Huang Fu Lai Jun. Huang Fu Lai Jun smiled faintly and said in a clear voice, "Dong Ho's side admitted defeat just now. In addition, Qin Yu's side has already won against Shui Yu's side. With this, Qin Yu's side will win 2 consecutive victories, and the position of Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace will be obtained by Mr. Qin Yu." At this moment, the utmost East Sage Emperor also stood up. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu had a warm smile on his face. As soon as he stood up, Huang Fu Lai Jun immediately sat to the side and didn't say anything more. As for the utmost East Sage Emperor, he said, "Today, the result of the competition for the position of Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace has been decided. Qin Yu is the new Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace." As he said that, the utmost East Sage Emperor smiled as he looked at Qin Yu. Instantly, almost everyone's eyes were focused on Qin Yu, who was in the middle of the training field. Qin Yu also faintly smiled at the utmost East Sage Emperor, then bowed in thanks. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu continued, "From today onwards, the 4 great palace masters of our utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold will all be taken up by someone. For the sake of this joyous occasion, I've decided that tonight, our Mount Dazzling Gold will properly celebrate. Ordinary heavenly deities will celebrate in the barracks, while officers and the others will celebrate in the Imperial Palace." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Over 10,000 heavenly deities knelt down on one knee. The disciples of the Huang Fu clan, Qin Yu, Huang Fu Lai Jun, Black Wind Palace Master, Heaven Wasteland Palace Master, and the other palace masters knelt down on one knee and said respectfully. His voice was like a tide that resounded through the sky. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu revealed a smile on his face. At this moment, the utmost East Sage Emperor's mood was extremely good. Within the 8 great sacred grounds of the Divine Realm, the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold, the 3 God Kings with the highest status were the utmost East Sage Emperor, the 100 Flowers God King, and the Gold Sword God King. After them were the Misty Mystic Palace, Black Wind Palace, Heaven Desolate Palace, and Lai Jun Palace. After them were the 9 captains of the Heavenly God Army. As the Palace Master of the Misty Mystic Palace, Qin Yu's status was even higher than that of ordinary princesses and princes. In the 8 great clans of the Divine Realm, being a princess or a prince was just a status. It did not represent how high one's status was. If one wanted to have a high status, one had to have enough strength to fight for it. Night fell. When the curtain of night descended, the entire Divine Realm was pitch black. Only the dazzling gold city of the utmost eastern region's dazzling gold mountain was bathed in golden radiance. The entire dazzling gold city had become a city that never sleeps. Regardless of whether it was the utmost northern region's floating snow city's curtain of darkness, or the utmost southern region's light lens city's light of day, they were both created by grand mist spiritual treasures. It was very simple for Mount Dazzling Gold of the utmost eastern region to fill a small place like Dazzling Gold City with light. Within the Imperial City of Dazzling Gold City. Tonight, the Imperial City was unprecedentedly lively. The Golden Light Court of the Imperial City was the place where the utmost East Sage Emperor held his gathering. Tonight, the Golden Light Court was incomparably lively. Over 1,000 people were gathered here. Rectangular tables that were as transparent as mercury were placed one after another. 12 heavenly deities were seated at each of the rectangular tables. There were over 100 of such tables. The tables were arranged in picturesque disorder. Other than the rectangular tables, there were also those small transparent tables. Those small tables only had 1 or 2 people seated at them. The utmost East Sage Emperor and his wife were seated on the steps of the Golden Light Court. In front of the utmost East Sage Emperor and his wife was a small transparent table. The Gold Sword God King and the 100 Flowers God King were seated on either side of the utmost East Sage Emperor. In front of the two of them was also a small transparent table. On top of the table were all kinds of fine wine and delicacies. Below the 3 great God Kings were the 4 great God Kings. The Misty Mystic Palace Master Qin Yu, Black Wind Palace Master, Heaven Desolate Palace Master, and Lai Jun Palace Master were seated in 2 rows. Below them were the 9 captains of the heavenly deity army. Only these people had their own small transparent table. As for the others, even the princes and princesses, they were seated around those large transparent tables. Just this sort of distribution of food was enough to show the strict hierarchy of the divine realm. Actually, being a sage emperor is not that interesting. When Qin Yu heard the utmost East Sage Emperor, Huang Fuyu, talking to the people below, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Huang Fuyu did not speak much. After Huang Fuyu finished speaking, the entire Golden Light Court became lively. The lower-ranked officers all had similar statuses. Thus, they began to chat and drink to their heart's content. As for the descendants of the Huangfu clan, they were also chatting happily. As for the utmost East Sage Emperor, he was chatting with the Gold Sword God King and the 100 Flowers God King. Occasionally, he would smile and say a few words to the 4 great palace masters below. As for Qin Yu and the others, they were mostly chatting with each other. Brother Qin Yu, I am the Hall Master of the Black Wind Palace, Guzong. You have been in the dazzling Gold City for many days. Only today did I have the opportunity to chat with you. Ha ha. The Hall Master of the Black Wind Palace, who was seated beside Qin Yu, said with a smile as he raised his cup. Qin Yu also raised his cup. Hall Master Guzong, I have also just entered the dazzling Gold City. There are still many things that I do not understand. Hall Master Guzong, please give me some pointers. This Guzong had silver eyebrows, silver hair, and a baby face. His entire being emitted an austere aura. Merely, when he smiled, he was very amiable and approachable. The Black Wind Palace Master and the Heaven Desolate Palace Master were both extremely experienced and had contributed greatly to the divine realm. They were not people that Qin Yu, a newly promoted Hall Master, could compare with. Haha, Brother Qin Yu, there is no need for you to worry about anything. These 4 great palace masters are originally fine. Only when the war breaks out will it be our turn to appear and lead the army into battle. The Black Wind Palace Master Guzong said with a smile. In the great war of the divine realm, God King level experts would not easily go out to battle. Under normal circumstances, it would be sufficient for us to oversee the war. Qin Yu nodded his head slightly to indicate that he understood. At this moment, the 2 palace masters opposite them, the Heaven Desolate Palace Master and the Lai Jun Palace Master, walked over. The Heaven Desolate Palace Master was a bald man. He wore a white silk robe and had a faint smile on his face. As for the Lai Jun Palace Master, he was Huangfu Lai Jun. He was a golden-haired man who was as calm as the ocean and as overbearing as a volcano. The Heaven Desolate Palace Master was a bald man who always had a smile on his face. Brother Qin Yu, I am the Heaven Desolate Palace Master, Ji Lusheng. You have been in the dazzling Gold City for so long, but I have yet to pay you a visit. I hope you don't mind. It should be me who pays you a visit, Heaven Desolate Palace Master. Qin Yu immediately stood up. Huangfu Lai Jun laughed heartily. This is the first time that Brother Ji and Brother Gu have met Qin Yu. On the other hand, I have met Qin Yu a few times. Haha, come, the 4 of us don't treat each other as outsiders. Sit down. After saying that, Huangfu Lai Jun sat down cross-legged. The 4 great palace masters gathered together and started chatting with each other. As they toasted each other, the Heaven Desolate Palace Master and the Black Wind Palace Master began to talk more cordially. They were no longer as distant as before. Just when they were chatting heatedly, Huangfu Lai Jun suddenly raised his cup and said, Brother Qin Yu, old Brother Gu, old Brother Ji, to be honest, for me to become the Palace Master, I have actually seized your military authority. Today, I am here to ask for forgiveness. I hope that the 3 of you do not mind. Qin Yu was startled. Snatched military authority? What's going on? Qin Yu was completely confused. Seeing Qin Yu's expression, the Heaven Desolate Palace Master Ji Lushing and the Black Wind Palace Master Gu Zong understood Qin Yu's confusion. The Black Wind Palace Master Gu Zong said with a smile, Lai Jun said this mainly because our extreme eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold originally only had the Misty Mystic Palace, the Black Wind Palace, and the Heaven Desolate Palace. Then, because Lai Jun made a great contribution and the Misty Mystic Palace Master was still alive, a new palace was built. It is the Lai Jun Palace. Qin Yu understood the history, but he still didn't understand. Snatched military authority? What do you mean by that? Huang Fu Lai Jun said himself, Brother Qin Yu, our Mount Dazzling Gold's heavenly deity army has a total of 9 large companies. Normally, they would be led by the captains. However, when a war truly breaks out, they would be led by the palace masters. In the past, there were only 3 great palaces. The 3 palace masters each led 3 large companies of heavenly deities. However, now that the Lai Jun Palace has been established, our Lai Jun Palace is the commander of 3 large companies of heavenly deities. As for your 3 great palaces, you only led 2 large companies of heavenly deities. I have always been ashamed of this. I am truly sorry. Only now did Qin Yu understand. God King level experts didn't need to lead subordinates. A single God King was enough to decide the outcome of a war. Generally, in a war in the divine realm, God Kings wouldn't take action. Instead, it would be the palace masters who led the army of heavenly deities. Lai Jun, you don't have to take it to heart. When you became the palace master, I, Baldy Ji, and Old Lon each gave you a large company of heavenly deities. This was decided a long time ago. Firstly, you were very powerful. Furthermore, you dared to fight and risk your life in leading an army. Palace Master Gu Zong said with a smile. Qin Yu completely understood. Brother Lai Jun, this is only a small matter. Actually, I am not proficient in leading an army. I am more passionate about formations. I am also slightly interested in cultivation or artifact forging. As for the rest, Qin Yu smiled and shook his head. The Heaven Wasteland Palace Master, Ji Lushing, immediately said with a smile, Brother Qin Yu, don't be modest. I saw your formation space on the martial practice grounds. The formidableness of that formation space is definitely comparable to the space of a God King. On the battlefield of the divine realm, with you, as long as your opponent isn't a God King, you will definitely win. The number 1 person beneath the God Kings. These words aren't false. Huang Fu Lai Jun said with a chuckle. Qin Yu smiled modestly. Suddenly, Qin Yu thought of something. He immediately asked, Brother Lai Jun, where is the previous palace master of the Misty Mystic Palace? Old Lon. Gu Zong and Ji Lushing glanced at each other and then sighed. Huang Fu Liejuan's expression also became somewhat gloomy. He sighed and said, The great war of the divine realm 6 quadrillion years ago was truly too bitter. That war could be said to be the greatest war since the creation of the divine realm. In that war, over 10 God Kings had fallen. As for the high-level heavenly deities that died, countless of them had died. Qin Yu was overwhelmed with shock. Over 10 God Kings that died? Countless high-level heavenly deities? Gu Zong smiled bitterly and said, Brother Qin Yu, let me tell you. The 3 great palaces, the Misty Mystic Palace, the Black Wind Palace and the Heaven Wasteland Palace, were all named after their first palace masters. In that war, the Misty Mystic Palace, Black Wind Palace and Heaven Wasteland Palace's first palace masters had all fallen. It was during that war that I succeeded the position of Black Wind Palace's palace master. It is the same for me. Ji Lushing sighed. That war was truly too bitter. It caused the sky to turn dark and the earth to turn dark. Practically all of the God Kings had appeared. It was so much so that even heavenly exalted level experts had fought from the shadows. Qin Yu felt a burst of fear in his heart. Exactly what sort of war had occurred 6 quadrillion years ago? When Qin Yu was in Yuchi City, he had once heard the Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan's father-in-law talk about the war of the divine realm. That high-level deity had only said that there would be a great war in the divine realm every 6 billion years. However, it would appear now that the great war that occurred once every 6 billion years could only be considered as a small war. The great war 6 quadrillion years ago was the true war. God kings had fallen one after another. Even heavenly exalted level experts had fought from the shadows. The first palace masters of the 3 great palaces of the utmost eastern regions Mount Dazzling Gold had all died. From this, one could tell how bitter and bitter the war was. Why did such a war occur? Qin Yu asked. There was most definitely a reason for all of this to occur. The God Kings would not be madmen that would fight a war for no reason at all. Reason. That war concerned the opportunity to become an exalted celestial. In the end, a God King won that war and became the new exalted celestial. From then on, the divine realm had 3 exalted celestials. Huangfu Liijun sighed and said, "The upper echelons that had experienced the war 6 quadrillion years ago were very clear about the course of events of that war." New exalted celestial? Qin Yu was shocked. It was no wonder that the entire divine realm had gone crazy and caused so many God Kings to fall. So it was actually an opportunity to become an exalted celestial. Didn't the divine realm have 3 exalted celestials? Why did only the most frightening war that engulfed the entire divine realm happen? Qin Yu asked in confusion. According to his estimations, there should have been 3 such wars. Black Wind Palace Master Gu Zong shook his head and said with a smile, "No, when the divine realm was born, there were already 2 exalted celestials." Qin Yu came to a sudden realization. When the divine realm was born, there were already 2 exalted celestials. In the past 12 quadrillion years, only 1 new exalted celestial was born in the entire divine realm. That new exalted celestial had become an exalted celestial during the Great War 6 quadrillion years ago. What a bitter war! Qin Yu felt a strong throbbing just by thinking about it. 3 exalted celestials. 2 of them had existed since the birth of the divine realm. The last one had also succeeded by relying on the opportunity of the Great War. None of them had succeeded by relying on cultivation alone. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was to become an exalted celestial. Chapter 558. On the second day after the banquet, Qin Yu brought Uncle Fu, Qiuzhong Fu and the others to the misty mystic palace. In the imperial city at the center of the dazzling gold city, there were a total of 5 great palaces. One of them was the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace, while the others were the 4 great palaces. Qin Yu's misty mystic palace was the leader of the 4 great palaces. This misty mystic palace is truly large. Qin Yu looked at the misty mystic palace before him and couldn't help but say with a smile. Qiuzhong Fu said respectfully, "Master, the misty mystic palace and the other 4 great palaces are the commanders of the heavenly deity army. There are also elite heavenly deity squadrons stationed here. Naturally, the area is larger." Elite heavenly deity squadrons? Qin Yu didn't know about this matter. After the banquet, the utmost East Sage Emperor called Qin Yu over and had a good talk with Qin Yu. After that, he handed the Palace Master's command plate to Qin Yu. As for some trivial matters, he didn't mention them. At this moment, the guards at the entrance of the misty mystic palace saw Qin Yu. Back then, when Qin Yu and the others were fighting for the position of Palace Master on the martial practice field, this guard had seen Qin Yu. At this moment, he recognized Qin Yu with a single glance. "Quick, go and report this to the great captain," that guard said to the other guard. As for himself, he ran before Qin Yu and respectfully knelt down on one knee. The Misty Mystic Palace's first elite squadron, Flowing Blade Wind, pays his respects to Lord Palace Master. Qin Yu lightly nodded his head. "You may rise." As for Qin Yu, he began to ponder. The Misty Mystic Palace's first elite squadron? It seems that there should be quite a few people, not just a single squadron. Qin Yu directly asked, "How many elite squadrons are there in the Misty Mystic Palace right now?" That guard said respectfully, "The heavenly deity army is divided into 9 squadrons. The The first and second squadrons belong to the Misty Mystic Palace. The two great captains have each dispatched 2 elite squadrons to await Lord Palace Master's orders. The two great captains have also arrived at the Misty Mystic Palace a long time ago and are waiting for Lord Palace Master's orders. With 2 elite squadrons each, there would be a total of 4 elite squadrons. As the guard Lu Jiufeng spoke, a man and a woman walked out from the entrance of the Misty Mystic Palace. Behind this man and woman were 4 other people. They were also 2 men and 2 women. Princess Jing? Qin Yu looked at the woman in shock. It was Huang Fu Jing. Huang Fu Jing walked over with a smile. Qin Yu. Ah, I should call you Palace Master now. You didn't expect this, did you? I'm the captain of the 2nd Heavenly Deity Battalion, and now I'm your direct subordinate. The man next to Huang Fu Jing was a muscular man with yellow hair like a yellow lion. Subordinate Ing Qiu, the captain of the 1st Heavenly Deity, greets Lord Hall Master. The burly man bowed respectfully. Your surname is Ing? Qin Yu asked in surprise. Qin Yu's Qin clan could be traced back to the era of Qin Shi Huang. In fact, their surname was Ing. Speaking of which, Ing Qiu and Qin Yu could be considered to be from the same family. This also caused Qin Yu to feel a trace of closeness toward this Ing Qiu. Ing Qiu, Ing Qiu. Haha, what a great name. Qin Yu said with a laugh. This caused Ing Qiu to be completely confused. Huang Fu Jing wrinkled her nose and humphed. Lord Hall Master, does the name Ing Qiu make you happy? Speaking of which, this Ing Qiu could be considered to be from the same family as me. Well then, let's not keep standing at the entrance of the palace. Let's talk inside. With a smile on his face, Qin Yu walked into the Misty Mystic Palace. Qin Yu checked into the Misty Mystic Palace. Soon after, Qin Yu brought over 100 heavenly deity servants from the Flowing Cloud Mansion to the Misty Mystic Palace. At the same time, he dispatched an elite squadron of the Misty Mystic Palace's 4 elite squadrons to the Flowing Cloud Mansion. From the day he checked in, Qin Yu's daily life was to stay in the Misty Mystic Palace. Qin Yu stayed in the Misty Mystic Palace. Right after he started his peaceful life, Wu Lan, Lu Shui, Hong Yu and Wu He in the Zhonglan's realm wanted to trouble Qin Yu with something. Misty Mystic Palace. Listening Wind Hall. Qin Yu sat on the master seat. Uncle Fu and Qiuzhong Fu stood on either side of him. As for Tanjiu and the other 3 heavenly deities, they were standing below. Tanjiu, I have an important matter that I need you to do. The 3 low-level heavenly deities behind you will also listen to your orders. Qin Yu said directly. Currently, Tanjiu was extremely respectful toward Qin Yu. After that battle, Qin Yu had bestowed that enormous high-quality heavenly divine artifact heavy sword to Tanjiu. After obtaining that high-quality heavenly divine artifact, Tanjiu's strength increased greatly. It could be said that there were no mid-level heavenly deities that could match him. Even high-level heavenly deities would not dare to look down on Tanjiu. After all, Tanjiu's 9 great clones were frantically attacking him. As a high-level heavenly deity, you might be able to destroy space and destroy a single clone. However, you wouldn't be able to destroy all 9 clones, right? Tanjiu's other clones would be able to use high-quality heavenly divine artifacts to teach high-level heavenly deities a painful lesson. With Tanjiu's strength increasing to such an extent and Qin Yu's current status, Tanjiu would naturally be even more respectful toward Qin Yu. Master, please instruct me. This subordinate will definitely do his best to complete the mission, said Tanjiu respectfully. Qin Yu slightly nodded and said, I have 4 monstrous beasts. These 4 monstrous beasts are all about to undergo their divine tribulations. Merely, Mount Dazzling Gold does not allow ordinary deities to appear, much less allow monstrous beasts to undergo their divine tribulations. They are about to undergo their divine tribulations soon. I plan to have you all be responsible for taking care of these 4 monstrous beasts. After they finish their divine tribulations, inform me. Hearing that it was such a simple mission, Tanjiu immediately replied, Yes, Master. Good, I'll bring you all away from Mount Dazzling Gold first. Qin Yu directly stood up. He then turned around and said to Uncle Fu and Qiuzhong Fu, "Uncle Fu, Qiuzhong, the two of you stay in the Misty Mystic Palace and wait for my return." "Yes." The two of them accepted the order. Qin Yu then brought Tan Jiu and the other 3 heavenly deities and left the Misty Mystic Palace. Qin Yu had no choice but to go. That was because Wu Lan and them were staying in the Zhonglan's realm. Qin Yu couldn't possibly have Wu Lan and them come out right now. Furthermore, he also could not give the Zhonglan's realm to Tan Jiu. Thus, Qin Yu could only personally go out. Mount Dazzling Gold had very few restrictions on the freedom of the heavenly deities. Other than the ordinary heavenly deities that required the approval of their superior officers, ordinary high-level heavenly deities or Qin Yu and the other 3 palace masters were able to leave Mount Dazzling Gold as they wished. When the guards at the entrance of the Dazzling Gold City saw Qin Yu, they immediately let him pass. The battle on the martial practice field had caused practically everyone in the Dazzling Gold City to recognize Qin Yu. "It's Palace Master Qin Yu. Open the city gate." The guards immediately shouted. There were very few heavenly deities entering and leaving the Dazzling Gold City. This caused the majority of the time, the city gate to be closed. Just like this, Qin Yu and them left the Dazzling Gold City. After exiting the Dazzling Gold City, Qin Yu and them began to rapidly fly. Soon, they passed through the mountain path. Then, following the tunnel, they exited Mount Dazzling Gold. Qin Yu and them landed on the ground. "Wu Lan, Wu He, Hong Yu, Lu Shui, the 4 of you will follow Tan Jiu for the time being. After you all have successfully passed your divine tribulations, I will come and pick you all up." With an intention from Qin Yu, an enormous subterranean cave dragon appeared before them. The subterranean cave dragon's body was several hundred meters long. As for its slender and sharp tail, it was over 100 meters long. Its several hundred cyan black claws were flickering with a cold radiance. Its ice-cold eyes were staring at Qin Yu. The subterranean cave dragon spoke. "Master, Wu Lan and the other 2 are inside the scales on my abdomen." Qin Yu slightly nodded. Tan Jiu and them were shocked. They never expected that the monstrous beast Qin Yu spoke of was actually the subterranean cave dragon. Although the subterranean cave dragon was a monstrous beast, its strength was close to that of a low-level heavenly deity. "Tan Jiu, I'll leave the 4 of them to you." Qin Yu looked to Tan Jiu with a light smile on his face. "Master, please rest assured." Tan Jiu felt relaxed. For the emperors of monstrous beasts like the subterranean cave dragon, it was extremely easy for them to pass their divine tribulations. Even without passing their divine tribulations, their strength would still surpass high-level deities. Thus, the difficulty for them to pass their divine tribulations would naturally be much lower. "Well then, I'll take my leave first." Qin Yu took a glance at the subterranean cave dragon. With the spatial energy of his universal world, he discovered the half-human-sized black ant with black-colored light flowing through its body within the scales on the subterranean cave dragon's abdomen. That was Wu Lan's true body, the Emperor of Ants. The black submerged ant. Qin Yu raised his gown and soared into the sky. He directly flew toward the enormous Mount Dazzling Gold that covered the sky and the earth. In a blink of an eye, Qin Yu disappeared before Tan Jiu and them. Wu Lan had followed Qin Yu since the mortal realm. Thus, Qin Yu's feelings toward Wu Lan were much more important than Tan Jiu, Qiuzhong Fu and them. After seeing Wu Lan off from Mount Dazzling Gold, Qin Yu also had a load off his mind. After returning to the Misty Mystic Palace in the imperial city of the Dazzling Gold City, Qin Yu directly walked toward his residence. "Master." Uncle Fu and Qiuzhong Fu walked toward Qin Yu. Qin Yu directly said, "Uncle Fu, from today onwards, I plan to enter seclusion training. This time around, I will continue until I completely open the 3rd layer space of the Zhonglan's realm. I'll leave everything in the Misty Mystic Palace to you." After settling the matter with Wu Lan, Qin Yu did not have anything else to do. Uncle Fu also sensed Qin Yu's determination. He promptly said, "Master, please be at ease and train. This old servant will definitely take care of everything in the Misty Mystic Palace." Qiuzhong Fu also bowed to Qin Yu. Qin Yu slightly nodded. He then entered his bedroom and directly entered the second layer space of the Zhonglan's realm. Inside the second layer space of the Zhonglan's realm, Qin Yu was slowly walking on the flat grassland. On top of the isolated mountain peak in the distance, Kuro was still thrusting his spear unceasingly. At this moment, Kuro's flowing light spear path had become even more spirited. Each and every spear thrust gave Qin Yu a sensation of time and space being in disorder. Is this the law of the world? It's truly amazing. Qin Yu lightly smiled. Casually, Qin Yu sat cross-legged on the soft and flat grassland. He closed his eyes. Qin Yu was able to feel the gentle breeze blowing on his face. This caused Qin Yu to involuntarily reveal a peaceful smile. Quietly, time passed by unconsciously. As Qin Yu was meditating, the divine energy within his body was rapidly transforming into heavenly divine energy. Qin Yu knew that even if he were to completely transform his divine energy into heavenly divine energy, he would still need to form the bloodshed Jin Dan. During the process of the transformation of the divine energy, within the flower paste space, the universal world that Qin Yu created was also expanding its range at an astonishing speed all the time. The universal world seemed to have started breathing. With every breath, a vast amount of flower paste energy would be absorbed from the flower paste space. This caused the universal world to grow even larger. The current universal world was over 100,000 times larger than the immortal, devil and demon realm. It was too large. However, even though this was the case, the universal world was still expanding at an astonishing speed. The price for its expansion was that the flower paste energy was being consumed unceasingly. After 30+ years in the second layer space of the Zhonglan's realm, Qin Yu's divine energy had already transformed by 80%. And at this moment, Qin Yu's entire body trembled. The peaceful smile on his face had completely disappeared. The wind in the Zhonglan's realm suddenly grew stronger. The weather of the Zhonglan's realm changed according to Qin Yu's mood. Qin Yu's eyes suddenly opened. At this moment, in Qin Yu's eyes were revolving nebulae, Lu Xing's fall, exploding stars and various other scenes of the universe's evolution. At the same time, Qin Yu's body disappeared into thin air. Inside the universal world, Qin Yu appeared in the sky of the universal world. At this moment, Qin Yu's mental state had reached an unprecedented peak. Qin Yu muttered in a low voice, "Never would I have expected that the universal world had already grown to its limit." That's right, at this moment, the universal world had already stopped growing. Its area was no longer increasing. Qin Yu suddenly raised his head and looked to the sky. If it had grown to its limit, then according to my comprehension from back then, the next realm would be... Qin Yu had a slight smile on his face. He suddenly raised his right hand and pointed his index finger to the sky. Immediately, the boundless universal world began to tremble. This enormous world that was over 100,000 times larger than the immortal, devil and demon realm appeared as if doomsday had arrived. The ocean roared and churned, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The grasslands were instantly engulfed and covered. Heaven and earth shatter. Universe split. Qin Yu muttered in a low voice. Immediately, it was as if millions upon millions of lightning bolts had descended from the entire universal world. That sort of frightening sound resonated throughout the entire place. The azure blue sky, like a shattered porcelain plate, began to fall apart. The earth also split open, creating enormous ravines that spanned hundreds of millions of miles. In Qin Yu's eyes, various scenes of the universe's evolution flashed past. Universe form. Qin Yu muttered in a low voice. Immediately, boom. A soul-shaking voice resounded throughout the entire Chenkuan world. The Chenkuan world, which had already collapsed to its limit, completely exploded. The barrier between the Chenkuan world and the flower paste space was affected by the explosion and was actually forced open in all directions. At the same time, even more flower paste energy began to frantically rush into the universal world. The shattered sky, earth and rivers began to absorb the flower paste energy. Some of it turned into planets, some into stars, some into the boundless outer space, some into enormous nebulas, boundless stars, vast starry sky. The destruction of the universal world created an enormous universe that was over 10 times larger than the universal world. As for the creator of this enormous universe, Qin Yu, he was currently standing in the boundless outer space of this boundless universe. Chapter 559. Stars, planets, terrifying black holes, and dazzling nebulas were born just like that. Bursts of strange and refreshing energy began to fill the entire universe. The gorgeous starry sky was right before his eyes. Qin Yu had a peaceful smile on his face. In his eyes, there were clouds and Lu Xing flashing past. All kinds of scenes were constantly changing. Qin Yu gently closed his eyes. Everything of the entire universe appeared in Qin Yu's mind. The creation of heaven and earth, the creation of the universal world, the destruction of the universal world, the creation of an even vaster universe. This stellar transformations technique is indeed unpredictable. The realm after the universal realm, as I expected, is the universe realm. However, will the evolution of this universe be as I expected? Qin Yu thought to himself. According to Qin Yu's speculation, only when his hometown, the purple mystic star, the immortal, devil and demon realm and the divine realm were all combined together could it be considered a complete universe. A complete universe should be divided into 3 layers. The lowest layer was formed by the countless dimensions of the mortal realm. The middle layer was formed by the immortal, devil and demon realm, the dinosaur realm and countless other dimensions. The highest layer was the divine realm. This was what Qin Yu thought. Thus, he also wanted the universe realm to evolve according to this path. Merely, this cosmos that Qin Yu had created, the lowest layer, the cosmos where the mortal realm was located, had yet to completely evolve. It was like a pyramid. The lowest layer was the layer with the largest area. The divine realm was the highest layer. Thus, its overall area was only that large. As for the middle layer, it was the layer where the immortal, devil and demon realm and a large amount of other dimensions gathered. As for the mortal realm, its area was thousands of times larger than the middle layer. The mortal world has the most amount of space and the largest surface area. Even though this universe that I created is more than 10 times larger than the shattered universal world, it still hasn't reached the requirement of the countless space in the mortal world. Qin Yu was able to clearly feel it. His universe had already been divided into over 900,000 parallel dimensions. The mortal realm had over 900,000 parallel dimensions. However, there were more than 900,000 parallel spaces. This was still far from the number of parallel spaces in the mortal world. This universe was still constantly absorbing the flower paste energy and expanding. Qin Yu believed that as the universe expanded, the number of parallel dimensions in the mortal world would increase. How I look forward to the universe I created forming 3 layers and reaching the most perfect state. Qin Yu felt a sense of pride in his heart. Qin Yu's magnificent lotus clone had been studying and comprehending the spatial comprehension the entire time. Merely, this sort of comprehension required sufficient time. Generally, it would take thousands of years. Qin Yu's magnificent lotus clone had only been training for a short period of time. Qin Yu suddenly frowned. I wonder if the shattering of the universal world and turning it into the cosmic space would have a great effect on my strength in the divine realm. Qin Yu started to worry a bit. The spatial energy of the universal world was something that Qin Yu relied on. After a short moment, Qin Yu disappeared from the rooftop. Eastern region of the divine realm. Inside the dazzling gold city's imperial city. Inside the misty mystic palace. Qin Yu was standing in the main hall. Qin Yu was controlling the spatial energy of the new cosmos to dissipate. At the moment when Qin Yu controlled the spatial energy of the new cosmos to dissipate, Qin Yu felt that the spatial energy of the new cosmos was surging. With Qin Yu as the center, the spatial energy of the new cosmos poured out in torrents in all directions. A range of nearly 5,000 meters. Within this range of nearly 5,000 meters, everything was within Qin Yu's observation. One must know that before the shattering of the universal world, Qin Yu was only able to cover a range of 200 to 300 meters. The spatial energy of this new cosmos was clearly much more powerful than before. Huang Fu Jing. With a range of 5,000 meters, Qin Yu was not only able to see everything within the misty mystic palace, he was also able to see Huang Fu Jing, who was walking on the streets of the imperial city. At this moment, Huang Fu Jing was walking toward the misty mystic palace with a smile on her face. The guards of the misty mystic palace did not stop her. Thus, Huang Fu Jing directly met Uncle Fu. Princess Jing. Uncle Fu smiled and bowed. Huang Fu Jing immediately asked, "Has Qin Yu come out of seclusion? The last time I came here, he was already in seclusion training." Huang Fu Jing said somewhat helplessly. Uncle Fu was slightly startled. Qin Yu was Uncle Fu's master. Uncle Fu was able to sense Qin Yu's location. Qin Yu had indeed come out. He was in the main hall of the courtyard where Qin Yu was. However, whether or not Qin Yu wanted to see Huang Fu Jing was not something Uncle Fu could decide. "Uncle Fu, tell her to come over." Qin Yu transmitted. Uncle Fu immediately smiled easily. "Princess Jing, Master has just come out of seclusion. Please come with me." As he spoke, Uncle Fu led the way. Huang Fu Jing's face had a hint of an excited smile. After passing through the courtyard gate, Huang Fu Jing saw Qin Yu, who was standing in the courtyard. "Lord Palace Master." Huang Fu Jing deliberately bowed in a very formal manner. Qin Yu shook his head and smiled. "Princess Jing, there is no need for you to treat me like this. You can just address me as Qin Yu." "Oh, that's right, Princess Jing, why are you in such a rush to find me?" Huang Fu Jing promptly said. "Oh, it's my imperial father who had me come to ask you if you have any needs in the area of artifact crafting. If you need any materials, please do not hesitate to order people to go get them." Artifact crafting. Only now did Qin Yu remember those golden scrolls that the utmost East Sage Emperor had given him. The reason why the utmost East Sage Emperor had supported him to become the Misty Mystic Palace's Palace Master was so that he could craft artifacts for him. Right now, I am still researching. The path of artifact crafting cannot be rushed. As for what materials I need, I will order people to go get them when I begin my experiments. Qin Yu's method of dealing with this was a single word: delay. Qin Yu knew that the most important thing for him was to open the third layer space of the Jianglan's realm. Everything else would have to wait until the third layer space was opened. Huang Fu Jing lightly nodded. "Imperial Father is not in a rush. He merely wanted me to inform you." "Oh, that's right, Qin Yu, you're always training here. Could it be that you don't feel bored? How about we leave the dazzling gold city and go out for a stroll?" Huang Fu Jing looked to Qin Yu with anticipation. It was likely that Huang Fu Jing had said that the artifact crafting materials were fake and that she wanted to invite Qin Yu to be together with her. However, how could the current Qin Yu possibly have the time to waste on this? Furthermore, Qin Yu already had Li Er in his heart. "Princess Jing, I still need to train. Let's talk about going out for a stroll in the future." "I am truly sorry." Qin Yu tactfully declined. A trace of disappointment flashed through Huang Fu Jing's eyes. She then forced a smile and said, "In that case, you can continue to train. I will not disturb you anymore." After saying that, Huang Fu Jing turned around and left. Qin Yu looked at Huang Fu Jing's back as she disappeared from the courtyard. He could only sigh and then disappear. Inside the new cosmos that Qin Yu created. On the new purple mystic star, Qin Yu stood on the peak of the new East Hazy Mountain. This cosmos is still in the process of growth. The lowest level of the mortal realm has yet to be completely formed. Only a very small portion of the temporal laws of this new cosmos can be used. Qin Yu looked to a small blade of grass on the surface of the ground. With an intention, the flow of time within 10 meters of Qin Yu suddenly accelerated. Very clearly, the blade of grass beside Qin Yu's feet slowly turned yellow at a visible speed. In the end, it withered. From being overflowing with vitality to completely withered, the time it took for the blade of grass to wither was actually less than 2 hours. All of the grass within 10 meters of Qin Yu had withered. However, outside of 10 meters, The blade of grass was still overflowing with vitality. Chapter 560. At the moment when the cosmos was formed, Qin Yu knew that he was already able to use the first portion of the temporal laws. In this incomplete cosmos, if one were to forcibly use the temporal laws that surpass the tolerance of the cosmos, then it would only cause the cosmos to collapse. This new cosmos is still in a growing state. Right now, I am only able to use time acceleration. Furthermore, I am only able to accelerate time to over 2,000 times. Regarding this, Qin Yu was still very satisfied. After all, even the third layer of the Zhonglan's realm was only able to accelerate time by 1,000 times. Furthermore, Qin Yu was able to clearly sense that the limit of time acceleration that he could use was increasing along with the expansion of the new cosmos. Once the cosmos reached a certain level, accelerating time by 1,000,000 times would no longer be an extravagant hope. Qin Yu also knew that time acceleration was merely the first level of the temporal laws. When the cosmos shattered and the cosmos was formed, Qin Yu already had a rough understanding of the temporal laws. The temporal laws were separated into 3 levels. The first level, time acceleration. This was the most basic level. However, in the divine realm, the majority of the god kings were still struggling at this level. Some of the god kings had not even reached this first level. Although there were many god kings struggling at the first level of the temporal laws, there were still differences between them. The weak ones were only able to accelerate time by several tens of times. The strong ones were able to accelerate time by 1,000 times, 10,000 times, or even more. The second level, time stop. This level was frightening. Once a god king managed to comprehend time stop, then ordinary god kings would be trampled upon by them. Only by using extremely powerful spiritual treasures would they be able to barely break through time stop. Upon reaching this level, one would be the strongest god kings in the divine realm. The third level, time reversal. Once one comprehended time reversal, then one would have completely comprehended the temporal laws. At this moment, this god king would have reached the exalted celestial level. That was because once a powerful god king used time reversal, he would be able to return to when he was weak. This was the powerful aspect of exalted celestials. On the new purple mystic star, the sky was filled with twinkling stars. Qin Yu stood at the peak of East Hazy Mountain. I wonder what level Uncle Lon has reached in the laws of time. Qin Yu muttered to himself. In Qin Yu's heart, he had long since treated Uncle Lon as a relative, as an elder. He also hoped that Uncle Lon could achieve greater things. Qin Yu wasn't too clear about the strength of the god kings of the deity realm. However, Qin Yu understood one thing. Any god king who controlled the laws of space was capable of defeating him. Qin Yu turned his head and looked to his side. A person suddenly appeared beside Qin Yu. He was wearing a green robe and had long green hair. It was Qin Yu's magnificent lotus avatar. From today onwards, you shall train here. The limit of the flow of time here is much faster than in the Zhonglan's realm. Qin Yu said with a light smile. Yes, true body. The magnificent lotus avatar bowed to Qin Yu. He then sat down cross-legged and started to train. The flow of time has doubled again. Qin Yu lightly smiled. In the blink of an eye, the limit of the flow of time had increased again. As the cosmos continued to expand, the flow of time would continue to increase. As for his own cultivation speed, it would also become faster and faster. With an intention from Qin Yu, that large lump of dark and yellow energy also appeared beside Qin Yu. The divine spear waning snow was still floating within the dark and yellow energy. The universal world had shattered. All of the items from the universal world had arrived in this new cosmos. Although the dark and yellow energy cannot enter the Zhonglan's realm, in this new cosmos, the speed at which the divine spear waning snow absorbs the dark and yellow energy has increased by several thousand times. Soon after, Qin Yu also sat down cross-legged and started to quietly train. In the utmost northern region's floating snow city of the divine realm. Outside of the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace. At this moment, a handsome silver-haired youth wearing a white gown was standing outside the palace entrance. This handsome silver-haired youth did not utter a single word. Just like that, he quietly stood outside the palace entrance. An equally handsome green-gowned youth walked over from afar. When this green-gowned youth's eyes were closed, lightning would occasionally flicker in his pupils. This man was precisely Qin Yu's old acquaintance, Zhou Xian. Duanmu Yu, you're also here? When Zhou Xian saw Duanmu Yu standing outside the palace entrance, he spoke with a frown. At this moment, that handsome silver-haired youth wearing a white gown also turned around to take a glance at Zhou Xian. He lightly smiled and said, "Brother Zhou, could it be that you're allowed to come but I'm not?" Zhou Xian's eyes slightly narrowed. Lightning began to circulate around his body. He, Zhou Xian, was the prince of the Thunder Punishment City, one of the Divine Realm's 8 great sacred lands. Among the Divine Realm's 8 great sacred lands, only the Thunder Punishment City did not have a palace master. Zhou Xian was a high-level heavenly deity. His status was so high that it was second only to the god-kings of the Thunder Punishment City. However, Zhou Xian knew that the Duanmu Yu before him was no ordinary person. Duanmu Yu was the prince of one of the Divine Realm's 8 great sacred lands, the utmost southern region's Light Lens City. In terms of strength, he was also a high-level heavenly deity. Furthermore, he was also the palace master of the Light Lens City's Bright Jade Palace. His status was also extremely high. As for Duanmu Yu, he was Zhou Xian's love rival who wanted to marry Li Er. Faced with Duanmu Yu's gaze, Zhou Xian finally smiled. "Brother Duanmu, you are naturally allowed to come. Merely, I am curious as to why you're standing outside the palace entrance and not coming in." At this moment, the guard of the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace spoke. "Lord Zhou Xian, His Majesty Sage Emperor has ordered that regardless of who it is, no one is allowed to enter the Sage Emperor's palace right now. Lord Zhou Xian can wait here until Lord Sage Emperor allows the two of you to enter. Lord Zhou Xian can also leave temporarily and come back next time." Only then did Zhou Xian realize that it was actually an order from the Sage Emperor. Duanmu Yu took a glance at Zhou Xian. "Brother Zhou, are you going to wait here or are you going to return first?" Zhou Xian lightly smiled. He shot a glance at Duanmu Yu and then walked out of the palace entrance. He quietly stood shoulder to shoulder with Duanmu Yu. "Since Brother Duanmu is able to wait, I am naturally also able to wait." Duanmu Yu lightly smiled and then grew silent. As for Zhou Xian, he also grew silent. Just like that, the two of them stood there quietly, inside a side hall of the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace. The outside of the side hall was completely quiet. However, the inside of the side hall was the sound of an intense quarrel. "Second brother, can you not be this stubborn? While you dote on Li Er, how could I not dote on her? She is a girl. Is there anything wrong with her marrying someone? Are these people that want to marry her not worthy of her? Second brother, why must you always make things difficult for me in this matter?" The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhong Fan said angrily. Zhou Xian, Duanmu Yu and them had been in the utmost North Territory's floating snow city for many years. The reason why these people wanted to marry Li Er was because of her. He, the utmost North Sage Emperor, was naturally willing. He was completely capable of obtaining a lot of benefits for the utmost North Territory's floating snow city through this. However, this matter was completely obstructed by his second brother Zhong Lan. Zhong Lan's expression was cold and indifferent. He looked to the utmost East Sage Emperor Zhong Fan. "Big brother, I have already said that Li Er's marriage must be something that she is willing to do. Although you can no longer withdraw your marriage, the date of the groom search must still be decided by Li Er herself." Zhong Fan had already announced the public groom search. As the utmost North Sage Emperor, he naturally could not go back on his words. Merely, the date of the groom search had yet to be set. This also caused Zhou Xian and a large group of people to wait here the entire time. After all, to heavenly deities, time was not of much significance. They were also not in a rush. Instead, they were all bribing and befriending people in the floating snow city and trying their best to create a favorable situation for themselves. Zhong Fan looked to Zhong Lan angrily. Zhonglan, on the other hand, did not react. Big brother, didn't you use your clan protection spiritual treasure to bind me back then? If you have the ability to bind me again, do you have the ability to bind me again? Last time, because of the benefits of the 8 great divine families, I did not resist. This time, for the sake of Lier, even if you are to use your clan protection spiritual treasure, I will still try and see whether or not I am able to contend against you. Zhonglan took a cold glance at Zhong Fan. The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhong Fan was startled. His expression became complicated. Back then, when the 8 great divine families joined hands to kill the God King of Life Zhuo Qiumei, there were too many reasons involved in this matter. It was not only because of the remarkable abilities that the God King of Life possessed, it was also because of the relationship with the Azura God King of the Azura Sea. However, no matter what, Zhonglan and Zhuo Qiumei were in love. He, the utmost North Sage Emperor Zhong Fan, used the righteousness of the 8 great divine families to persuade Zhonglan and used his clan protection spiritual treasure to bind Zhonglan. Because of this, Zhong Fan had always felt somewhat guilty toward his second brother. After all, ever since that day, his brother that was originally extremely close to him had now become cold and detached. Zhong Fan took a slight breath. He started to frown. Second brother, perhaps what happened back then had caused you great harm. However, this matter was a joint decision of the 8 great divine families. After all, you are also a descendant of the 8 great divine families. Zhonglan had a trace of pain in his eyes. That's right, I am a descendant of the 8 great divine families. Thus, I did not resist being bound. However, I should have chosen to die together with her. Zhonglan's eyes were filled with grief. Suddenly, Zhonglan's gaze turned sharp. Big brother, Lier had absorbed Mei's soul tear of life. Even if I were to die, I would still not allow anyone to force her. Even if he were to die, he would still not allow it. The utmost North Sage Emperor Zhong Fan slightly trembled. His second brother Zhonglan's determination was truly too great. This time's groom search cannot be delayed any longer. The other sage emperors have all discussed this with me. No matter what, we cannot delay it any longer. Zhong Fan said sincerely. Zhonglan humphed coldly. Unless you wish to truly fight me. Otherwise, don't even think about forcing Lier. Zhonglan took a glance at his big brother. Even if we were to truly fight, it would still be hard to say who would live and who would die. After he finished saying those words, Zhonglan disappeared. Zhong Fan was startled. He then smiled bitterly. Back then, when faced with the marriage proposals from all those outstanding individuals, Zhong Fan was extremely happy. He even said that he would hold a public groom search. However, who would have thought that after he announced the groom search, the date of the groom search had been delayed the entire time. Lier was simply unable to obstruct the utmost North Sage Emperor Zhong Fan. The person obstructing Zhong Fan was precisely this second brother Zhonglan. Fight you? Indeed, even if I were to use my clan protection spiritual treasure, it would still be hard to say whether or not I would be able to defeat you. Zhong Fan was also uncertain. Furthermore, no matter what, Zhong Fan would not kill Zhonglan. After all, Zhonglan was one of the 3 great god kings of the floating snow city. If he were to kill Zhonglan, wouldn't it be the same as cutting off his own arm? Inside the floating snow city's wood mansion, Zhonglan looked at Lier's residence in the distance and sighed. Every time he faced his big brother, Zhonglan would feel a burst of irritation. I must continue to delay until little Yu possesses sufficient strength and status. Zhonglan sighed. However, when he thought of Qin Yu, Zhonglan instead displayed a smile on his face. Zhonglan knew very well about Qin Yu's astonishing progress. Never had I expected that a little boy from the mortal realm would now become the palace master of the misty mystic palace on the Mount Dazzling Gold. Inside the cosmos created by Qin Yu, the weeds that Qin Yu sat on had already withered and grown over 20 times. Finally, a faint jade-green radiance appeared on the surface of Qin Yu's body. In Qin Yu's mind, streams of heavenly divine energy were intertwining with one another like waves. As they rotated violently, a jade-green-colored Jin Dan was born in the center of the heavenly divine energy. The jade-green-colored heavenly divine energy that poured into this jade-green-colored Jin Dan was completely absorbed. The bloodshed jade Jin Dan was formed. Just like that, the bloodshed jade Jin Dan floated onto the palms of Qin Yu's soul Yuanying. The divine energy has finally completely transformed into heavenly divine energy and formed the bloodshed jade Jin Dan. I ought to be able to open the third layer of the Zhonglan's realm now. Qin Yu opened his eyes. Qin Yu had a pleasantly surprised expression in his eyes. He looked to the magnificent lotus clone beside him and then looked to the divine spear waning snow that was slowly absorbing the dark and yellow energy. Qin Yu lightly smiled and then left. Qin Yu directly appeared in the main hall of his residence in the misty mystic palace. When I open the third layer of the Zhonglan's realm, I will be able to see Li Er. Qin Yu held the little green pagoda in his hand. However, Qin Yu's hands were slightly trembling. He was excited from the bottom of his heart. Streams of heavenly divine energy were directly poured into the Zhonglan's realm. Qin Yu's hands were slightly trembling the entire time. Finally, the entire little green pagoda suddenly shined. The third layer of the Zhonglan's realm had opened. Qin Yu's eyes emitted a joyous radiance. At the moment when the third layer of the Zhonglan's realm opened, Zhonglan, who was currently in the wood mansion in the utmost northern region's floating snow city, was shocked. After that, a trace of joy appeared in his eyes. After that, Zhonglan disappeared from the floating snow city. Chapter 561. Holding the little green pagoda with one hand, Qin Yu's eyes were filled with joy, excitement, and even a trace of fear. All these years of hard work, all these years of anticipation, when it finally came true, regardless of how tenacious Qin Yu's heart was, he still had a trace of cowardice. Has it finally opened? The third layer space of the Zhonglan's realm had already opened. However, Qin Yu still felt as if he was dreaming. He raised his head and looked to the sky through the entrance of the main hall. In the sky, silk-like soft white clouds were drifting about. A gentle breeze blew past. It scattered Qin Yu's long hair. Qin Yu looked toward the direction of the wind. Through the entrance of the main hall was the courtyard. Qin Yu's gaze landed on the bewitching willow tree in the courtyard. The bewitching willow tree had tens of thousands of branches drifting about. However, right at this moment, a human figure suddenly appeared below the tens of thousands of branches. It was as if this person had always existed here. A familiar gaze, a familiar smile, a familiar face, everything was so familiar. Lon, Uncle Lon. Qin Yu felt as if his entire body had been pierced through by lightning. His mind quivered. Although he knew that everything was real, he did not know what was going on. Ever since the opening of the third layer space of the Zhonglan's realm, Qin Yu had entered into a state of sleepwalking. He felt as if he was floating. Everything seemed to be unreal. Qin Yu took 2 or 3 deep breaths in succession. Only then did his heated head gradually cool down. As the cool breeze blew onto his face, Qin Yu felt that his heated face also gradually cooled down. Little Yu. Zhonglan had a pampering smile on his face. Never would I have expected that in merely 10,000 years, you've actually reached such a high level of cultivation. Furthermore, you've even become the palace master of the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold's misty mystic palace. Once Zhonglan spoke, Qin Yu's restless heart completely calmed down. Qin Yu also returned to his normal state. Qin Yu was suddenly startled. He promptly said, "Uncle Lon, you've come. Would that utmost East Sage Emperor and them?" Zhonglan smiled indifferently and said, "Rest assured that Huang Fu Yu, Huang Fu Lei and Huang Fu Liuxiang would at the very most only pay attention to their mansion at all times. They would not pay attention to your misty mystic palace. Moreover, even if they deliberately came to observe, it would be very difficult for them to discover my existence." Qin Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Qin Yu wasn't too sure about the methods of the divine kings, but since Uncle Lon had said so, he definitely had something to rely on. "Uncle Lon, come in first." Qin Yu immediately invited Jiang Lan into the main hall. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission to Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu, regardless of who comes, you are not allowed to disturb me. Qin Yu was Uncle Fu's master. In the face of Qin Yu's orders, Uncle Fu would naturally carry them out. In the hall, Jiang Lan sat down. However, Qin Yu did not. You should also sit, Jiang Lan said to Qin Yu with a slight smile. Don't act like a child. Qin Yu could be said to have experienced a lot of battles. Even when facing the utmost East Sage Emperor, the 100 Flowers God King and them, Qin Yu had never restrained himself. It was so much so that before the utmost East Sage Emperor, Qin Yu had always possessed a sense of arrogance. However, before Uncle Lan, Qin Yu discovered that he was like a child that had returned to the presence of his elders. The coldness and aloofness of the past had completely disappeared. All that was left was the restraint of a child. After being urged by Jiang Lan, Qin Yu finally sat down beside Uncle Lan. At this moment, Jiang Lan had a gratified smile on his face. As he looked at Qin Yu, the more he looked at him, the more he liked him. He then picked up the teacup beside him and took a sip. With a smile on his face, he said, Little Yu, did you know that today is the happiest day of my life in all these years? Qin Yu stood to the side and listened attentively like an obedient child. Ever since Li Er returned to the divine realm with me, I have been concerned about your matters the entire time. Even the matter of you refining the bewitching God Temple was something that I had secretly used some methods to prevent any of the God Kings of the divine realm from detecting it. Jiang Lan said with a smile. Qin Yu was unable to refrain his shock. That's right. God Kings controlled the spatial laws. Although they were unable to use their divine awareness to pass through the spatial membrane to investigate, as long as they wanted to, it would not be hard for them to find out about the matters of the lower realms. Him refining the bewitching God Temple was a major matter. Qin Yu had been baffled the entire time. Could it be that not a single God King had noticed it? Why didn't any God Kings come to find trouble for him? Now, it would appear that it was precisely Uncle Lan who was secretly helping him. Of course, it was impossible for me to pay attention to you all the time. I could only leave behind an imprint on your body so that I would know when you were in danger. Jiang Lan told Qin Yu everything. Imprint? Qin Yu was slightly stunned. Uncle Lan, you've left an imprint on my body? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Qin Yu's confidence was not baseless. His confidence came from the new cosmos spatial energy. Under the observation of his spatial energy that he had complete control over, Qin Yu did not believe that anything would be able to escape his observation. Jiang Lan lightly smiled and said, It's actually very simple. I had actually left an imprint on the Jiang Lan's realm. Since you've refined the Jiang Lan's realm, it could be said that I've left an imprint on your body. Jiang Lan's realm. Only then did Qin Yu realize. The first layer, second layer and third layer of the Jiang Lan's realm all possess my imprint. As long as you open a layer, I would naturally know about it. That was the reason why I appeared when you opened the first layer and the second layer. As for the third layer of the Jiang Lan's realm, it also possesses my imprint. As you have yet to open the third layer, you naturally do not know about it. However, when you open the third layer, that imprint would automatically disappear. Jiang Lan explained carefully. Qin Yu completely understood now. No wonder his spatial energy was unable to investigate. It turned out that the imprint was in the third layer of the Jiang Lan's realm. As he had not opened it in the past, he was naturally unable to investigate it. Once he opened it, that imprint would disappear. Furthermore, it would not be discovered by him. Haha, let's not talk about that anymore. Little Yu, when I discovered that you've refined the bewitching God Temple, I truly heaved a sigh of relief. If you had not refined the bewitching God Temple and merely relied on my assistance, it would indeed be extremely difficult for you to marry Li Er. Jiang Lan sighed and said. Qin Yu was no longer the hothead from the mortal realm. After being in the divine realm for so long, he already knew about the general matters of the divine realm. Li Er possessed a drop of soul tear of life. That drop of soul tear of life contained half of the God King of Life's Wachomei's life energy essence and comprehension of the spatial laws. To some high-level heavenly deities, this was indeed a springboard to the God King level. After all, there were many people in the divine realm who had reached the peak of the high-level heavenly deity level. They were all a step away from becoming God Kings. However, this step had trapped many geniuses. Once they were able to dual train with Lier and comprehend a portion of the comprehension left behind by the God King of Life, they might be able to make a breakthrough and directly become God Kings. Little you've also refined that drop of soul tear of life. Thus, you ought to know about the secret of the soul tear of life. When the God King of Life died, she left behind 2 drops of tear. One of them assimilated into Lier's body. As for the other drop, it split open the space and entered the spatial crack. Zhonglun said with a smile. Qin Yu immediately paid attention to it. He knew that his Lu Xing's tear was precisely a drop of tear left behind by the God King of Life. Uncle Lon, you all. Qin Yu suddenly came to a realization. Zhonglun slightly nodded and said, "That's right. Lier obtained a drop of soul tear of life. Thus, she was able to sense the location of the other drop of soul tear of life. Merely, the other drop of soul tear of life had been drifting through the spatial crack the entire time. Thus, I was unable to accurately find it the entire time." After all, Lier only possessed a general sense of direction. Only after a very long time did Lier and I discover that the other drop of soul tear of life was already fixed in another space. Thus, Lier and I went over to that space and arrived at your hometown, the Purple Mystic Star. Uncle Lon, when you first saw me, did you already know about it? Qin Yu felt ashamed in his heart. Back then, Qin Yu had considered Lu Xing's tear to be his important secret. He had thought that Uncle Lon and them would not necessarily know about it. That's right. When Lier discovered you, she had already determined that you possessed another drop of soul tear of life. After all, at that time you were too weak. You simply did not manage to refine the soul tear of life. Thus, you were only able to use some of its most basic energy. Zhonglun said with a light smile. Qin Yu could only smile. Back then, he had used the energy of Lu Xing's tear. At the beginning, he could only wait until he was injured and passively healed by Lu Xing's tear. Only later on did he manage to use the elemental life energy. That's right. Back then, when I was together with Lier in that underwater valley, I felt that the speed at which my soul's level increased by a lot. It would appear that this was the reason why Lier possessed the same soul tear of life as me. Qin Yu completely understood now. Qin Yu looked to Zhonglun. Uncle Lon, I have a question that I wonder if I should ask? Go ahead. Zhonglun was smiling the entire time. Back then, I did not manage to refine the soul tear of life at all. At the beginning, Uncle Lon, you all also did not know me. Thus, why didn't you kill me and seize the other drop of soul tear of life? Qin Yu asked. This sort of question was rather sentimental. Merely, Qin Yu had already considered Uncle Lon to be his relative. Thus, he did not care too much about it. Zhonglun sighed in a low voice. The soul tear of life contains spirituality. When the soul tear of life chose you, it means that the God King of Life herself chose you. Since she chose you, I naturally would not go against her final wish. Furthermore, the soul tear of life is not something that can be refined by just anyone. Qin Yu slightly nodded. After chatting for so long, Qin Yu had been suppressing the matters regarding Lier the entire time. At this moment, Qin Yu was also prepared to ask about it. Uncle Lon, what's wrong? Zhonglun saw that Qin Yu wanted to say something but was hesitating. He then looked to Qin Yu. Qin Yu pondered for a moment before saying, Uncle Lon, Lier, how is Lier right now? Zhonglun immediately started laughing. You finally thought about Lier. I had thought that you'd forgotten about her. Zhonglun said jokingly. This immediately caused Qin Yu to become anxious. Zhonglun promptly said, Haha, I'm merely joking. You don't have to mind it. However, speaking of Lier, the smile on Zhonglun's face gradually disappeared. Qin Yu grew anxious. Zhonglon said solemnly, Li Er's current situation is not very good. The main reason is because of her imperial father, the utmost North Sage Emperor. You ought to know about her identity, right? From Zhang Lan's point of view, although he did not tell Qin Yu about Zhang Li, with the current Qin Yu's status, it was extremely easy for him to find out about Zhang Li's identity. Qin Yu slightly nodded. Zhonglon continued. The greatest trouble is that Li Er's imperial father had already announced to the elites of the divine realm that he would hold a public groom search. This matter was personally announced by the utmost North Sage Emperor. It is impossible for him to take it back. Public groom search? How come I do not know about it? Qin Yu indeed did not know about this matter. Zhonglon said, You've only been in the divine realm for a short period of time. It is normal for you to not know about it. Furthermore, there are not many people who know about this matter. Qin Yu suddenly grew anxious. This utmost North Sage Emperor had already announced that he would hold a public groom search. Thus, the Sage Emperor would definitely keep his word. What sort of situation was Li Er in right now? Uncle Lon, the utmost North Sage Emperor, said that he would hold a public groom search. In that case, what about Li Er? Qin Yu promptly asked. Don't worry. Although the utmost North Sage Emperor said that he would hold a public groom search, the date of the groom search has never been set. I have also been helping Li Er delay it the entire time. Qin Yu, unless you're fully grown and possess sufficient strength to contend against those love rivals, I will continue to help you and Li Er delay it. Zhonglon consoled. Hearing those words, Qin Yu immediately felt a burst of warmth in his heart. How could he possibly repay Zhonglan's concern for him? Thank you, Uncle Lon. Qin Yu's eyes had also turned slightly red. Zhonglon stroked Qin Yu's head. He laughed and said, Don't thank me yet. Your current situation is also very bad. Right now, all of your love rivals for Li Er are all extraordinary. Extraordinary? Could it be that I cannot win against them? At this moment, Qin Yu had gained some confidence. He, Qin Yu, was also one of the 4 great palace masters of the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold. He was a Grand Master of formation arrays and the #1 person beneath the God Kings. How could he not be qualified? It's not that you cannot win against them. Rather, it's just that with your current strength and background, your chances of winning against them are very slim. Zhonglon shook his head. Although your formation array space is powerful, to the 8 great divine families, as long as it's not a God King, it would not amount to much. As for your rivals in love, they're not ordinary at all. Qin Yu looked to Zhonglon. Uncle Lon, tell me, who are the people that are capable of threatening me and Li Er to be together? Zhonglon grew silent for a moment and said, Your current status can be considered to be high. Your strength can also be considered to be powerful. Indeed, ordinary competitors are inferior to you. However, there are 4 people. In terms of strength, they are about the same as you. In terms of background and influence, they are stronger than you. 4 competitors? Qin Yu frowned. Although he had yet to hear the names and identities of these 4 competitors, Qin Yu had already listed them as his enemies. Chapter 562. I'll tell you the identities of these 4 people later. Right now, I need to tell you some things about the 8 god clans. Only by knowing some of the matters regarding the 8 great divine families would you be able to better understand the influence of these 4 individuals. Zhonglon said carefully. Qin Yu also quietly listened to Uncle Lan's narration. The 8 major god clans of the divine world are divided into the Huangfu clan of the extreme east, the Shinta clan of the extreme west, the Duanmu clan of the extreme south, the Jiang clan of the extreme north, the Mu clan of the northeast, the Putai clan of the southeast, the Tang clan of the southwest, and the Zhou clan of the northwest. The 8 great god clans are deeply rooted. However, there are only so many cities in the divine realm. As the number of people in the divine realm increases, the cities simply cannot accommodate them. More and more people have no choice but to live outside the cities. The 8 great god clans of the god realm had a discussion. Then, they decided to have a war in the God realm every 6 billion years. Originally, the purpose of this war was to reduce the population of the divine realm. Zhonglun knew very well about the various secrets of the divine realm. Reduce the population? Qin Yu was also shocked. This was a war that happened once every 6 billion years. Compared to the long lifespan of the people of the God realm, this frequency was already very high. Qin Yu immediately understood the difficulties of the 8 great divine clans. He nodded slightly and said, "Yes, there are only so many cities. If there are too many people, there will definitely be more people outside the city. This way, it will be more troublesome to control, and more bandit forces will be born." At first, it was to reduce the population. Zhonglun smiled helplessly and said. However, after the successive wars, the 8 great divine clans had forgotten during their discussion that even the 8 great divine clans are extremely competitive. In the beginning, the major god clans only let the heavenly gods lead the armies and let the deity armies fight against each other. They attacked each other's cities and strongholds. However, because they were eager to win, some powerful Empyrean deities and some disciples of the 8 great divine clans also entered the battlefield. On the battlefield, no one cared about your identity. Even if you were a prince, you could still be killed. Once every 6 billion years. This sort of battle had already occurred over 1,000,000 times. In the wars of the divine realm, there were also some high-level heavenly deities that died. Many of the descendants of the 8 great divine families had also died. This resulted in a grudge between them. Zhonglun also felt a bit helpless. Thus, the 8 great divine families have also separated into different camps. Faction. Qin Yu found it funny. Qin Yu originally thought that these 8 great divine clans should belong to the same breath and branch, but now it seemed that the relationship between the 8 great divine clans was not harmonious. Among the 8 great divine clans, one side is the Duanmu clan, the Tang clan, and the Mu clan. The other side is the Zhong clan and the Shuntu clan. These 2 powers could be said to be opposing each other. Zhonglun mentioned these 2 powers. Qin Yu instead asked in confusion, "Uncle Lon, what about the other 3 great divine families?" Zhonglun had only mentioned 5 divine clans. As for the other 3 Protoss clans, the Huangfu clan and the Putai clan are considered to be in the same camp. However, both of them don't like war and are considered to be in the gravity camp. They did not participate in the war at all. At most, the 2 sides will let their armies kill each other. As for the final Zhou clan, Zhonglan's expression was a bit serious. The Zhou clan is a bit special. The Zhou clan will not help anyone. At the same time, none of the other 7 great divine families will attack them. Why? Qin Yu frowned. Of the 8 great divine families, why was the Zhou clan the sole exception? Little Yu, actually, the 8 great divine families all have their own duties. This Thunder Punishment City is in charge of all kinds of calamities, heavenly tribulations, divine tribulations, and so on. Everything is managed by the Zhou clan. Qin Yu was shocked. This Zhou clan was truly astonishing. With merely this, it is still not enough for the other 7 great divine families to treat them differently. The most important thing is, of the 3 great exalted celestials of the divine realm, one of them is from their Zhou clan. Zhonglan's words were extremely shocking. Qin Yu's heart jumped. Exalted celestial? That was already a legendary existence. They were existences above God-King level experts. One of the 3 great exalted celestials was actually from the Zhou clan. No wonder the Zhou clan was so exceptional. Uncle Lon, what about the other 2 exalted celestials? Where did they come from? Qin Yu asked curiously. Zhonglun frowned. The other 2 exalted celestials? That's very hard to say. Little Yu, when the divine realm was born, there were already 2 exalted celestials. Of these 2 exalted celestials, one was from the Zhou clan. As for the other one, his identity was extremely hidden. He did not belong to any of the 8 great divine families. Qin Yu slightly nodded. During the most frightening great war of the divine realm 6 quadrillion years ago, at that time, all the god kings appeared and fought against each other for the sake of seizing that opportunity to become the new exalted celestial. However, regardless of how the 8 great divine families and some hidden god king level experts fought against each other, in the end, they only managed to become a god king that belonged to an ascender powers. That god king also relied on this opportunity to become the new exalted celestial. Qin Yu suddenly realized. So the final exalted celestial actually belonged to the ascender powers. Qin Yu gasped in admiration. Zhonglun slightly nodded and said with a smile. Had it not been for the birth of this exalted celestial, how could the Mount Blood Demon, Azura Sea and Dual Domain Island have grown to their current state under the eyes of the 8 great divine families? Qin Yu nodded and gasped in his heart. The influence of an exalted celestial was truly too great. Regardless of how many ascenders there were in the divine realm, their influence would not be able to match that of an exalted celestial. However, that exalted celestial was a loner. He did not have a deep relationship with the Azura Sea, Mount Blood Demon and Dual Domain Island. As long as our 8 great divine families do not join hands to eliminate these 3 powers, then that exalted celestial would not interfere. Zhonglun said with a light smile. After all, that exalted celestial also needed to take into consideration the Zhou clan's exalted celestial. Qin Yu smiled and said, Uncle Lan, do the 3 exalted celestials not have names? Zhonglun said, 3 exalted celestials. We normally address the Zhou clan's exalted celestial as the Thunder Punishment exalted celestial. The exalted celestial that was born 6 quadrillion years ago is the unfettered exalted celestial. As for the final exalted celestial, his identity is the most secretive. Reportedly, the exalted celestial with the highest status among the 3 exalted celestials is the Floating Feathers exalted celestial. Thunder Punishment exalted celestial, Unfettered exalted celestial and the most secretive Floating Feathers exalted celestial. These were the 3 paramount exalted celestials of the divine realm. The Floating Feathers exalted celestial with the highest status? Qin Yu was slightly stunned. Zhonglun said with a light smile. This is something that I have deduced from my countless years of experience. This Floating Feathers exalted celestial's origin is very secretive. His strength is also secretive. However, regardless of whether it is the Thunder Punishment exalted celestial or the Unfettered exalted celestial, they both treated the Floating Feathers exalted celestial with great respect. Merely, that Floating Feathers exalted celestial simply did not involve himself in the struggle between the powers of the divine realm. Qin Yu slightly nodded. Even exalted celestials are separated into strong and weak? Qin Yu displayed a confused expression. According to Qin Yu's point of view, those that had comprehended the spatial laws and the worldly laws would become exalted celestials. They were all exalted celestials, yet they were separated into strong and weak? I also do not understand. I reckon that one would not be able to understand before reaching the exalted celestial level. Zhonglun looked to Qin Yu. The 8 great divine families, the 3 great ascender powers and the 3 exalted celestials, you already know about all of this. Now, I will tell you the identities of your 4 strongest competitors. Qin Yu was unable to refrain himself from frowning. Among the 4 competitors, they are the weakest. Of course, they are still a bit more competitive than you. As Zhonglun said that, he looked to Qin Yu with a smile. Qin Yu could only smile bitterly. Among the 4 competitors, the weakest one was still stronger than him. This was truly a helpless situation. This man is called Kue-in Ho. He is the palace master of the utmost northern region's floating snow city's Kue-in Ho Palace. He is also the first palace master of the Kue-in Ho Palace. He could be said to have made a lot of contributions to the floating snow city. This man is extremely popular in the floating snow city. On top of that, he has already reached the peak of the high-level heavenly deity level. He is pursuing Li Air. Many people in the floating snow city support him. Even the utmost North Sage Emperor Zhong Fan found it hard to refuse such a request from his old subordinate. Zhonglun sighed and said. Qin Yu immediately remembered this Kue-in Ho. Originally, there were only 3 palaces in the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold. The first palace masters of those 3 palaces had all died. This Kue Ho was actually the first palace master. His qualifications were truly old. Compared to him, Qin Yu did not seem to possess much of an advantage. Among the 4 competitors, the second weakest one is Shun Tufan. Once Zhang Lan said those words, Qin Yu immediately became alert. Shun Tu? Could it be the Shun Tu clan of the 8 great divine families? Zhang Lan continued. Shun Tufan is a very, very adorable youngster. As Zhang Lan said that, he started to laugh. Speaking of it, Shun Tufan was forced by his imperial father to pursue Li Er. Shun Tufan is a genius youngster. His cultivation speed is extremely fast. Currently, he is also a high-level heavenly deity. However, all of these do not amount to much. His greatest reliance is, among the 8 great divine families of the divine realm, only the Shun Tu clan is in the same faction as the Zhang clan. Qin Yu had a bitter smile on his face. That's right, the Duanmu clan and the other 2 divine families were in the same faction. The Zhang clan was also only in the same faction as the Shun Tu clan. Although they are in the same faction, the Shun Tu clan is usually led by the Zhang clan. With how much the Shun Tu clan has helped the Zhang clan, they now want their prince to marry Li Er. It is also very difficult for the utmost North Sage Emperor Zhang Fan to refuse. After all, the relationship between the 2 clans is too intimate. Zhang Lan shook his head and sighed. Qin Yu was already able to clearly sense the pressure brought to him by these competitors. The third competitor is actually also a youth that I am very fond of. It could be said that he is extremely perfect. Zhang Lan exclaimed in admiration. Qin Yu was shocked. To be able to make Zhang Lan determine that person to be perfect, that person was indeed an extraordinary person. This person is called Duanmu Yu. Duanmu Yu? Duanmu clan? Isn't that the opposing faction of the Zhang clan? Qin Yu asked. Zhang Lan smiled and said, Opposing faction? Although they are called opposing factions, they are only opposing each other in ordinary wars. When it comes to major issues, the relationship between the 8 great divine families can be considered to be decent. Furthermore, Duanmu Yu's influence in the utmost southern region's Lightland City is extremely large. He is even comparable to the utmost South Sage Emperor. Comparable to the utmost South Sage Emperor. Qin Yu was unable to believe it. Zhang Lan continued. This Duanmu Yu could also be considered to be a legendary character. That exceptional love from back then had caused the entire divine realm to be in an uproar. Who would have thought that the extremely ordinary woman that Duanmu Yu loved actually cast him aside? Cast aside? Qin Yu was stunned. The so-called perfect man that Zhang Lan spoke of was actually cast aside by an extremely ordinary woman? Although that woman later regretted her decision incomparably, what use was it? Exactly why did that woman break off her relationship with Duanmu Yu? That is also a secret of the divine realm. Zhang Lan said with a light smile. However, to be honest, this Duanmu Yu, in terms of strength, had already reached the peak of the high-level heavenly deity level. His attitude toward anyone was also extremely good. Regardless of whether it was toward his parents, relatives, or brothers, he would definitely not have any objections. A person like him is truly too perfect. He is so perfect that even I am unable to find any flaws in him. Oh, perhaps there is a flaw. He no longer believes in love. As for whether or not this could be considered as a flaw, I am not certain. No longer believes in love. Qin Yu felt his mind become muddled. This Duanmu Yu was truly too peculiar. However, with my understanding of him, even if he no longer believes in love, as long as he marries someone, he would definitely give that girl an endless amount of care. For someone like Duanmu Yu, there are truly a lot of people that want to become his wife. Zhang Lan sighed and said. Zhang Lan continued. Not only that, Duanmu Yu is also the palace master of the utmost southern region's Lightland City's Bright Jade Palace. The Bright Jade Palace is also the head of the utmost southern region's Lightland City's 3 palaces. In terms of strength, status, and character, there was nothing that could be said about them. Furthermore, He also said that once he marries Lier, he would gift 20 cities under the utmost southern region's Lightland City to the utmost northern region's Floating Snow City. Qin Yu sucked in a mouthful of cold air. What an enormous betrothal gift. The utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold only possessed a total of 64 cities. This Duanmu Yu was actually willing to gift 20 cities under the utmost southern region's Lightland City to the Floating Snow City. This magnanimity of his was truly worthy of admiration. This Duanmu Yu said to gift cities, and the utmost southern region's Lightland City actually gave them? That's 20 cities. The number of cities in the divine realm was fixed. It was not something that one could build just because one wanted to. Don't forget what I said earlier. This Duanmu Yu's influence in the utmost southern region's Lightland City is comparable to the utmost southern region's Sage Emperor. Furthermore, this decision of his has already been approved by the utmost southern region's Sage Emperor and the other God Kings. Zhang Lan said with a smile. Qin Yu slightly nodded. He was indeed a very threatening love rival. The final one, you've also met him before. Zhou Xian. Zhang Lan sighed and said, to be honest, this Zhou Xian is also a high-level heavenly deity. Although he appears to be pretty good, when compared to the other three, I feel that he is inferior. However, behind Zhou Xian is the transcendent Thunder Punishment City. Most importantly, there is also that Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Thus, I have determined him to be your strongest competitor. After Zhang Lan finished saying those words, his gaze was fixed on Qin Yu. It was as if he wanted to see Qin Yu's reaction. Chapter 563. Zhang Lan only saw Qin Yu's appearance of contemplation. Silence. Qin Yu had been silent the entire time. However, he was pondering non-stop in his mind. The 8 great divine families, what they compete for is superiority and inferiority. To the 8 great divine families, as long as one has not reached the God King level, there would not be much of an effect. Although my formation array space is very powerful, it would likely still be looked down upon by the God Kings of the 8 great divine families. Qin Yu knew very well in his heart. The amount of trump cards that he could take out right now was simply nothing. As for those 4 competitors, Kue In Ho, he was the first palace master of the utmost northern region's Floating Snow City's Kue Ho Palace. He had worked hard and rendered great service. His connections were extremely vast. His relationship with the utmost North Sage Emperor was also extraordinary. Shun Tefan, he was the prince of the utmost western region's Mount Blazing Flame. Not only was he not strong, but the most important aspect was that among the 8 great divine families, the Shinta clan was the only one that had always been helping the Zhang family. Duanmu Yu, a near-perfect person. At the same time, he also brought with him a betrothal gift that was hard to refuse. Zhou Xian. Behind him stood the Thunder Punishment City and one of the 3 great Exalted Celestials, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. All of the competitors possess their own reliance. What is my reliance? Qin Yu frowned. Strength, sufficient strength. Artifact craftsmanship was also a form of strength. When I become another craftsman god, I ought to possess the qualifications to compete with them. Qin Yu thought in his heart. In fact, Qin Yu had always been extremely confident. That was because of the stellar transformation. The first 7 stages of the stellar transformation could only be considered as new and could not be considered as exceptional. However, the black hole realm that Qin Yu had created was connected to the flower paste space. The universe realm that he had created after that was a world of its own. And now, he had created a universe. He possessed a universe. How exceptional was this sort of accomplishment? Merely, this accomplishment was too great. It was so great that Qin Yu did not dare to speak of it carelessly. Perhaps only when his strength reached the point where he did not fear the exalted celestials would Qin Yu no longer keep it a secret. No matter what happens, I will not allow anyone to separate me and Lier. Even if a god king or an Empyrean interferes, at worst, I'll just take Lier and hide in my universe. Once my universe reaches a perfect state and my strength reaches the peak, I'll come back and deal with those who obstruct me. Qin Yu thought to himself. Qin Yu wasn't worried about outsiders daring to enter his own universe. Firstly, his own universe and the divine realm, immortal, devil and demon realm and the other universes that existed in countless other spaces were two separate universes. Perhaps even an Empyrean would find it very difficult to transmigrate to another universe. After all, Qin Yu's universe had its own unique space laws and time laws. Even if Empyreans can enter my universe, what can they do to me? Qin Yu was very confident. Although celestial exalts had comprehended the spatial and temporal laws, they had comprehended the spatial and temporal laws of the deity world's universe. Once the three great exalted celestials arrived in Qin Yu's universe, they would not be able to use any attacks at all. They could only allow themselves to be trampled upon by Qin Yu. Unfortunately, my universe is still in the process of growing. The amount of spatial energy that can reach the divine realm is still not much. Its binding ability is still too weak. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Currently, Qin Yu's new cosmos-spatial energy was only capable of binding mid-level heavenly deities. At the very most, it would only be able to obstruct high-level heavenly deities. As for the god-kings and exalted celestials, as long as they were in the divine realm's universe, Qin Yu would not be able to forcibly capture them and bring them to his own universe. Unless these god-kings and the three great exalted celestials were willing to go to Qin Yu's universe themselves. However, would they be that foolish? Little Yu, what are you thinking about? Zhang Lan asked. Qin Yu woke up. He smiled to Uncle Lon and said, I'm thinking about how to compete against these 4 competitors for Li Air. These 4 competitors are truly a great threat. Zhang Lan also slightly nodded. Qin Yu suddenly started to hesitate. This caused Zhang Lan to be confused. After a long while, Qin Yu said, Uncle Lon, didn't you say that you would arrange for me to meet Li Air after I opened the 3rd layer space of the Zhonglan's realm? Haha, so that's what you were thinking. Zhang Lan immediately started to laugh out loud. Qin Yu's face started to turn red, although he had actually trained for several 100,000 years. In terms of emotions, Qin Yu was still a fledgling, especially when he himself had worked hard for all these years for the sake of meeting Li Air. At this moment, when he asked for Uncle Lan's help, Qin Yu actually had a hard-to-open-his-mouth feeling. Well then, let's not talk about you anymore. The reason why I came here this time was also to bring you to the floating snow city to meet Li Air. You don't know this, but every time Li Air saw me, she would always ask, Uncle Lon, how is big brother Qin Yu doing? Hearing what Zhang Lan said, Qin Yu's chest was immediately filled with a sense of happiness. What Qin Yu was worried about the most was whether or not Li Air would fall in love with someone else after being separated from Li Air for such a long period of time. Although Qin Yu had never mentioned this thought, but Qin Yu also had this thought in the depths of his heart. He was also worried. After all, the two of them had been separated for too long. Qin Yu did not even dare to imagine what would happen to him if Li Air were to truly be together with someone else. Perhaps I will also become like that Duanmu Yu and not believe in love. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Fortunately, Li Air did not disappoint me. Qin Yu's affection for Li Air grew even deeper. Uncle Lon, let's go. Qin Yu took a deep breath and then said to Zhang Lan. Zhang Lan nodded with a smile on his face. He then pulled Qin Yu's hand. Just like that, the two of them disappeared from the misty mystic palace. As Zhang Lan had completely grasped the spatial laws, it was extremely easy for him to teleport while carrying another person. Qin Yu only felt that the scene before his eyes had changed. He had already arrived beside a pond. At this moment, Zhang Lan was also standing beside Qin Yu. Qin Yu was about to ask Uncle Lan about this place when he heard a voice. Lian Liuxiang, the two of you should stop joking around. That voice that had sounded in Qin Yu's dreams thousands of times once again sounded. Hearing that voice, Qin Yu's tenacious heart immediately melted. Princess, don't be shy. Earlier, I heard it clearly. You were muttering something about Qin Yu. I am certain that I did not mishear you. I also heard it. Princess, Why don't you just admit it? Princess, what's wrong? At this moment, Qin Yu appeared as if he had been possessed by the devil. Step by step, he walked toward the entrance of the courtyard not far away. The tear of Lu Xing in his soul was trembling unceasingly. I have never felt so clearly that you were right in front of me, Qin Yu muttered in a low voice. On the other side of the courtyard entrance, Li Er, who wore a loose white gown, was also walking toward the courtyard entrance step by step. The tear in her soul was also trembling. That sensation was so clear, so deep into her soul. Ever since she had returned to the divine realm, she had never felt Qin Yu's existence so clearly. 1 step, 2 steps. At a certain moment, Qin Yu and Li Er's gazes passed through the courtyard entrance and saw each other. At this moment, uncontrollably, their eyes became moist. Qin Yu opened his mouth. He wanted to say something. However, the words that had been hidden in his heart for hundreds of thousands of years, Qin Yu was unable to say a single word. Li Er also moved her lips. However, she also did not say anything. The two of them merely stared at each other. At this moment, in their eyes, there was only each other left in the entire world. At this moment, the two of them looked at each other. They were speechless. Unconsciously, Qin Yu and Li Er walked together. That impulse that seemed to originate from their souls, the two of them hugged each other just like that. They hugged each other so tightly. It was as if they wanted to completely embrace each other and fuse with each other. Seeing this scene, Jiang Lan smiled in a gratified manner. Merely, traces of tears were flickering in his eyes. Lian and Lu Xiang, who stood to the side, covered their mouths in shock. Jiang Lan immediately had those 2 servant girls leave first. Jiang Lan himself also quietly left. At the same time, he ordered that no one was allowed to disturb them. This period of time belonged to Qin Yu and Li Er. Qin Yu tightly hugged Li Er. Time and time again, he wanted to hug Li Er even more tightly in his bosom. It was as if he was afraid that Li Er would leave again. After an unknown amount of time, or perhaps it was merely an instant, Qin Yu and Li Er gradually relaxed. Qin Yu lowered his head and looked at Li Er, who was in his bosom. Li Er raised her head and looked at Qin Yu. The two of them looked at each other. Qin Yu suddenly lowered his head and kissed away the tears at the corner of Li Er's eyes. Li Er's tears grew even more. Li Er had a happy smile on her face. However, her tears were flowing. Li Er suddenly tiptoed and kissed Qin Yu's lips. Qin Yu was startled. He then turned around and kissed Li Er. Their lips and tongues intertwined. After a very long time, the two of them finally separated their lips. Li Er. Qin Yu finally spoke. Big brother Qin Yu. Li Er's eyelashes were still flickering with tears. I had originally thought that I would have to wait for tens of millions of years or even hundreds of millions of years. Never would I have expected that big brother Qin Yu. Li Er's face was filled with happiness. Qin Yu looked to Li Er. For some unknown reason, at this moment, Qin Yu felt that with Li Er, he possessed the entire world. And without Li Er, his world would be a stretch of darkness. For you, I can give up everything. That's because without you, I would lose everything. Qin Yu once again hugged Li Er a bit tighter. Chapter 564. Qin Yu leaned against the ancient ironwood tree, while Li Er lay in Qin Yu's embrace. The two of them had a lot of things to talk about, and they talked non-stop about the things that had happened to each other over the years. Qin Yu's story was very long and full of twists and turns. Although Li Er didn't have many stories after returning to the God realm, Li Er began to tell Qin Yu about her childhood. The two of them talked for 10 whole days, and only then did they feel slightly satisfied. Qin Yu didn't hide anything from Li Er, including the stellar transformations technique, the Chenkuan world that he created, and the universe that evolved into the universe. Qin Yu told her everything. Because of this, Li Er instead worshipped Qin Yu from the bottom of her heart. It's been 10 days. Li Er suddenly cried out. The current Li Er, compared to the Li Er in the mortal realm, was 2 parts less solemn and 2 parts more playful. After all, when they were in the mortal realm, she was much stronger than Qin Yu. They weren't even on the same level. The huge difference in strength also made it very difficult for Li Er to act spoiled in front of Qin Yu. But at this moment, Li Er was free and unrestrained. It's been 10 days. Qin Yu was also slightly surprised. Closed-door cultivation time might pass very quickly, but Qin Yu didn't expect that they would talk for 10 whole days. Uncle Lon must be angry. Li Er's willowy eyebrows frowned slightly. We didn't talk to Uncle Lon for the past 10 days, isn't that too? Qin Yu hugged Li Er and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Uncle Lon understands us." Li ponders for a while, then slightly nods. "That's good. Let's go find Uncle Lon in another, 4 hours. After 4 hours, we'll go find him." After saying so, Leah once again puts her head on Qin Yu's chest. Qin Yu stroked Li Er's hair lovingly. 2 hours later, Qin Yu and Li Er walked out of the courtyard. When Qin Yu and Li Er walked out of the courtyard, Li Er and Li Er walked out of the courtyard. Zhang Lan also appeared beside the pond. "The two of you have finally remembered this old fellow," Zhang Lan said happily. Ever since Zhua Qiumei died, Zhang Lan only had Qin Yu and Li Er in his heart. When Qin Yu and Li Er were happy, Zhang Lan also felt gratified. Qin Yu and Li Er looked at each other and smiled. "Well then, let's go over there and sit down first." Zhang Lan pointed to a stone table under a willow tree beside the pond. Beside the round stone table were 3 stone benches. Qin Yu, Li Er and Zhang Lan sat down together. Although talking about this matter right now is a bit of a spoil sport. However, I still need to tell you too. The matter of the groom search, how exactly do you two plan to resolve it? Zhang Lan looked to Qin Yu and Li Er. Qin Yu and Li Er's expressions immediately became serious. There are 2 methods. The first method is for the 2 of you to elope. The second method is for Qin Yu to participate in the groom search, defeat everyone and openly marry Li Er. Which method do you two choose? Zhang Lan asked. Li Er bit her lips. After chatting with Li Er for 10 entire days, Qin Yu knew most of the things that had happened to Li Er since she was a child. At this moment, Qin Yu also knew very well what Li Er was thinking. Li Er loved her mother very much. She also loved her younger sister Jiang Yan and Granny Yin Hua, who had watched her grow up. There was also a large group of people that she had known since she was a child. The Jiang clan was Li Er's home. Qin Yu understood this in his heart. Elopement. He and Li Er could completely hide in their own cosmos or the Jiang Lan's realm. In short, elopement was extremely simple. At the very least, it would allow Qin Yu to not have any burden. However, to Li Er, it was extremely painful. Li Er needed to leave her relatives, her good friends. She needed to leave her family. It was so much so that if they were to meet again in the future, the relationship between father and daughter might become even worse. Li Er, don't worry, I will definitely marry you openly. Qin Yu held Li Er's hand. Their 10 fingers were intertwined. At the same time, he looked to Li Er with a smile on his face. Li Er cannot help being moved in her heart. Big brother Qin Yu, I don't mind. I know that those people who want to marry me all have very great backing. I also know very well what they are thinking. Big brother Qin Yu, it's truly very difficult for you to win against them openly. Big brother Qin Yu, let's elope. It's all right, Imperial Father and Imperial Mother have a lot of children. It doesn't matter if I'm missing. Although she said it very straightforwardly, as she spoke, Li Er's eyes started to turn red. Well then, Li Er, trust me, I will definitely succeed. Qin Yu held Li Er's hand tightly. It was as if he wanted to let Li Er feel his confidence. Li Er looked to Qin Yu. In the end, she nodded. Big brother Qin Yu, do not force yourself too much. I won't. Qin Yu smiled brilliantly. Seeing Qin Yu and Li Er acting like this, Zhang Lan coughed. This caused Qin Yu and Li Er to turn their attention to Zhang Lan. It's not like little Yu doesn't have any chance. Little Yu possesses the Bewitching God Temple. As the successor of the Bewitching God Temple, he ought to have obtained Che-Ho Yuan's artifact crafting method. Zhonglun looked to Qin Yu with a smile. Qin Yu slightly nodded. Zhonglun continued. That's more like it. Continue to work hard. Little Yu's current level in formation arrays is already very high. If he were to work hard in artifact crafting, it would not be impossible for him to reach Che-Ho Yuan's level. Once he becomes the new craftsman god, then the hope of him openly marrying Yu would be greatly increased. As Zhonglun said that, he even smiled to Lier. Craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan? The new craftsman god? Lier said worriedly. Isn't that very difficult? Not at all, not at all. Qin Yu promptly said. In front of Lier, regardless of what Qin Yu did, he would always be filled with confidence and endless energy. Uncle Lan, I have decided to temporarily stay here and quietly research the path of artifact crafting. If something were to happen in the Misty Mystic Palace, my servants would send me a transmission. Chozhong Fu and a large group of people all had their souls bound. As Qin Yu was their master, even though there was a great distance between them, Chozhong Fu and them were still able to send mind-voice transmissions to Qin Yu. Mind-voice transmissions. This was something that only the master and those with their souls bound could accomplish. It was simply impossible for others to accomplish. It's good for you to stay here. After all, if anything were to happen, I can directly teleport you back. Zhonglun was also very reasonable. He knew that Qin Yu was unwilling to part with Lier. Zhonglun was also not worried. Ever since Lier said that the utmost North Sage Emperor had come to find her, Zhonglun had directly used a spatial barrier to seal off the entire Wood Mansion. Unless one was an exalted celestial or obtained Zhonglan's permission, it was absolutely impossible for one to enter the Wood Mansion. Uncle Lan, I'll return this Zhonglan's realm to you. Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out the Zhonglan's realm. Furthermore, with an intention, Kuro also came out from the Zhonglan's realm. Kuro had been quietly training in the Zhonglan's realm the entire time. At this moment, Qin Yu could only disturb him. Kuro took a confused glance at Qin Yu. He then saw Uncle Lan. At this moment, Qin Yu was chatting with Uncle Lan. Kuro could only remain silent. I do not need it. You can use it first. Zhonglan promptly said. In his heart, Zhonglan believed that although this Zhonglan's realm was a very powerful spiritual treasure, it was extremely important to Qin Yu. Qin Yu could only say, Uncle Lan, I have actually also opened up a space. Thus, even without the Zhonglan's realm, I am still extremely safe. To say that he had opened up a universe was truly too astonishing. Even Qin Yu was still guessing about the 3 layers of the universe. Opened up a space? Zhonglun said in disbelief. Your so-called opened-up space, is it a stable space? God Kings were able to use the spatial laws to create spaces. However, those spaces were unable to be stable. Zhonglan had used a large amount of treasures in order to create the Zhonglan's realm and stabilize the 3 spaces. That's right, a stable space. Qin Yu nodded and said, Xiaohei, I have already given the Zhonglan's realm to Uncle Lan. From today on, you can train in the cosmic space that I have opened up. Qin Yu said with a smile. Kuro nodded. He then bowed respectfully to Zhonglan. Kuro pays his respects to Uncle Lan. Xiaohei, I know that you, Xiaohei Eagle, have already married and given birth to a daughter. Zhonglan said with a chuckle. Kuro's grave and stern face immediately turned a bit red. Well then, let's go to Qin Yu's space and have a look. Zhonglan immediately changed the topic. Qin Yu slightly nodded. Uncle Lan, do not resist. Qin Yu instructed. Zhonglan was extremely trusting of Qin Yu. He allowed the energy to engulf him. In an instant, Qin Yu, Lier, Uncle Lan and Kuro had all arrived at the cosmos that Qin Yu had opened up. New cosmos. New purple mystic star. Purple mystic star. This is the purple mystic star. Kuro was dumbstruck. He then looked to Qin Yu with shock. Big brother, how did you do this? How did you suddenly arrive on the purple mystic star? Isn't the purple mystic star in the mortal realm? Zhang Lan, who stood to the side, had a solemn expression. No, this is not the purple mystic star. Zhang Lan looked to Qin Yu with disbelief. He was unable to say anything for a long time. Uncle Lan, what's wrong? Qin Yu promptly asked. Zhang Lan sighed and said, this space that little Yu has opened up is truly extraordinary. In this space, the spatial laws and a portion of the temporal laws that I have comprehended are all unable to be used. In here, even if I were to fly, I would still have to rely on the energy within my body. Hearing this, Qin Yu was extremely clear in his heart. This was simply another cosmos. Everything that Zhang Lan had comprehended in his original cosmos would naturally be unable to be used here. With this space, I am also relieved. Only then did Zhang Lan retrieve his Zhang Lan's realm. Zhang Lan was able to tell that the space that Qin Yu had opened up was much safer than the Zhang Lan's realm. In here, even if a god king or exalted celestial were to come, they would still be unable to attack others using the spatial laws. They could only rely on the energy within their bodies. With merely energy, how could they possibly be a match for the creator of this space, Qin Yu? In here, Qin Yu was invincible. Strange, strange. Kuro suddenly sighed. Big brother, this place is strange. After arriving here, I am actually unable to train in the flowing light spear path. Qin Yu was surprised. Isn't the flowing light spear path a temporal law? Here, I am also able to accelerate time. Why are you unable to train in it? Time acceleration. Zhang Lan was once again shocked. Time acceleration was the first level of temporal laws. Merely, in order to be able to comprehend the temporal laws, one must first reach the God King level. In the past, I was able to train in the Zhang Lan's realm. However, after arriving here, I am unable to even sense those marvelous rules. Kuro said helplessly. Qin Yu pondered for a moment. Let's return first. I think I have understood the reason. Qin Yu said directly. Zhang Lan and them looked to Qin Yu. They did not know what Qin Yu had understood. However, they still nodded. In a blink of an eye, Qin Yu and them returned to the wood mansion. Qin Yu looked to Kuro. Xiaohei, you can use the flowing light spear path now, right? I can. I am able to sense those marvelous rules. Kuro displayed a smile on his face. He then held the cloud-piercing spear in his hand and began to brandish it. Kuro's spear technique was extremely strange. According to your estimation, Kuro's spear might not be able to touch you. However, at the moment when you thought that spear had already pierced through your body. A strange flow of time. In the surroundings of the spear, the flow of time had completely changed. Time acceleration. You really know how to use time acceleration? Zhang Lan spoke in shock. Hearing what Uncle Lan said, Qin Yu was certain that Xiaohei's flowing light spear path was the initial usage of the temporal laws. I think that Xiaohei's flowing light spear path ought to be related to the Zhang Lan's realm. Uncle Lan, the Zhang Lan's realm that you created had a different flow of time compared to the outside world. Could it be because of the temporal laws? Qin Yu said with a smile. Zhang Lan nodded and said, of course. The three spaces all have different flow of time. Merely, the greater the flow of time, the harder it is to stabilize the space. I think that Xiaohei created the flowing light spear path because he sensed the trace of the initial temporal laws contained in the Zhang Lan's realm. Qin Yu voiced his guess. Zhang Lan shook his head. No, that's impossible. Without reaching the God King level, it is absolutely impossible for one to study the temporal laws. Uncle Lan thought that it was impossible. However, Qin Yu knew that it was possible. That was because, without reaching the God King level, one must absolutely not study the temporal laws. This was the rule of the divine realm's cosmos. However, the universal world that Qin Yu created did not have this restriction. That was why Kuro, a person who hadn't even reached the heavenly deity level, was able to step into the domain of temporal laws. There must be a reason for its existence. Uncle Lon, don't think too much about it, Qin Yu advised. His own cosmos, the divine realm, the immortal, devil and demon realm were two different cosmos. It was very difficult for Qin Yu to explain to Uncle Lon. Furthermore, this sort of thought was merely a guess. Kuro looked to Zhang Lon. Uncle Lon, it would seem that I will have to stay in your Zhang Lan's realm and train. In that case, you can just train. Zhang Lon said with a smile. Zhang Lon was the creator of the Zhang Lan's realm. The three spaces were also created by him. Currently, it was much easier for him to refine the Zhang Lan's realm compared to Qin Yu. As for Qin Yu, he said, Xiao Hei, you can slowly train in the Zhang Lan's realm. It's better for me to return to my own cosmos and study artifact crafting techniques. Qin Yu had already made his decision. He must devote himself to artifact crafting techniques until he reached the level of the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan. Chapter 565. Like the past hundreds of millions of years, snowflakes were still falling from the sky above the utmost northern region's floating snow city. When they landed on the ground, they were absorbed by the black slate. The majority of the places in the floating snow city were relatively noisy. However, the ancient wood mansion was still as tranquil as before. Outsiders simply did not know that there were several more people in the wood mansion. Qin Yu was determined to enter his own cosmos and begin researching the path of artifact crafting. As for Li Er, she also wanted to accompany Qin Yu. She said that when Qin Yu was researching the path of artifact crafting, she would be comprehending the spatial comprehension left behind by Zhuoqiumei. Under the wild willow tree, beside the stone table. Big brother Qin Yu, I truly do not wish to be separated from you for a long period of time. Li Er raised her head and stared at Qin Yu. How could Qin Yu possibly refuse her? Furthermore, Qin Yu also wished for this to be the case. I'll place the Bewitching God Temple into my cosmos. I will be researching artifact crafting in the Bewitching God Temple's Refining Flames Palace. You can train beside me. Qin Yu made his decision. Li Er immediately smiled sweetly and threw herself into Qin Yu's chest. Seeing how reluctant Qin Yu and Li Er were to part with each other, Zhang Lon also started to smile. Cough. Kuro deliberately coughed from the side. Then, Kuro looked to Zhang Lon. Uncle Lon, it's better that you allow me to enter the Zhang Lan's realm and train. I am truly unable to continue watching here. Qin Yu took a glance at Kuro with an annoyed expression. Kuro merely laughed. Xiao Hei, your flowing light spear path does indeed contain a portion of the temporal laws. Although I am unable to understand how you manage to comprehend it, there is a reason for its existence. You can continue to research it carefully. I truly wish to see what level you can reach. Zhang Lon looked to Kuro and said with a smile. After that, Kuro entered the third layer space of the Zhang Lan's realm. Uncle Lon, we're leaving. Qin Yu and Li Er stood up at the same time and said. Seeing Qin Yu and Li Er standing side by side, Zhang Lon felt extremely pleased. He nodded and said with a smile. Good. Little Yu, you should properly study the path of artifact craftsmanship. I am waiting for you to become the new craftsman god. Qin Yu looked at Li Er beside his arm and nodded slightly. Neoverse, New Purple Mystic Planet, Hidden Dragon Continent, East Hazy Mountain. Qin Yu directly placed the Bewitching God Temple on the other side of the East Hazy Mountain. It just so happened to be opposite the Misty Villa, within the courtyard of the Bewitching God Temple. This is the Bewitching God Temple? I have also heard of the great name of the Bewitching God Temple in the Divine Realm. However, I have never entered the interior of the Bewitching God Temple to take a good look. Li Er looked all around and couldn't help but sigh. Li Er, follow me. Qin Yu directly brought Li Er toward the Refining Flames Palace. In Qin Yu's heart, the Refining Flames Palace was the place where the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan would normally craft artifacts. Thus, there would definitely be some artifacts in there. However, When Chinyu broke through the formation array at the entrance of the Refining Flames Palace and entered, he discovered, what's going on? Lier also looked to the Refining Flames Palace in shock. Big brother Chinyu, there doesn't seem to be anything here. I'm also not sure. Chinyu carefully looked to every corner of the Refining Flames Palace. Although the Refining Flames Palace did not appear to be very large from the outside, the interior was an enormous palace hall with a length and width of over 1,000 meters. In the entire Refining Flames Palace, there were no small rooms. There was only a single great hall. The ground was black and there were 4 golden pillars. However, in the center of this great hall, there was actually only a single golden scroll. There are definitely tools for artifact crafting. However, why didn't Senior Che-Ho leave behind a single item? Chinyu extended his hand and that golden scroll floated into his hand. Furthermore, he unfurled it. Chinyu swept it with his divine awareness. Junior, who has inherited the bewitching God Temple, I am truly sorry. This time around, in order to refine the exalted celestial spirit treasure, I had to make ample preparations. This set of tools is the one that I am most familiar with. Thus, I brought the tools for artifact crafting with me. When Chinyu saw this, he could not help but be stunned. It would appear that he had been happy for nothing. However, Chinyu still continued to look. However, you do not have to be too disappointed. That is because true Grandmaster artifact craftsmen will not use the tools of others when it comes to artifact crafting. They will all use the tools that they themselves have refined. That is because only the tools that they themselves have refined are the tools that they themselves are most familiar with. Only through repeated experiments and repeated running in will they be able to make a tool that is perfectly compatible with you. The first difficult problem of artifact crafting is to refine your own set of tools. After Chinyu finished reading, he came to a complete realization. Big brother Chinyu, what's wrong? Lier asked from the side. She thought that Chinyu was disappointed that there was nothing left in the Refining Flames Palace. Big brother Chinyu, don't be disappointed. If you were able to obtain it, it would be due to luck. If you weren't able to obtain it, Chinyu smiled as he stroked Lier's beautiful hair. All right, I am not disappointed. Lier, you can cultivate over there. I will stay by your side and read those scrolls on artifact crafting techniques. Chinyu pointed with one hand. In the vast crafting hall, 2 jade-colored cloud beds appeared. Lier lightly nodded her head. Then, she flew and sat on one of the cloud beds. Chinyu's figure moved and he directly sat cross-legged on the other cloud bed. Chinyu waved his sleeve and golden scrolls immediately floated in front of him. There were close to 2,000 scrolls. These golden scrolls completely described artifact crafting techniques. The majority of them were bestowed by the utmost East Sage Emperor. Lier lightly smiled to Chinyu. Then, she closed her eyes and began to quietly comprehend the comprehensions left behind by Zuachome. Increase the flow of time to the extreme. Chinyu controlled the flow of time within the Refining Flames Palace to the extreme. Over 2,000 years in the Refining Flames Palace was only a single year in the outside world. After that, Chinyu began to carefully read the golden scrolls one by one. Chinyu was now a mid-level heavenly deity. His consciousness was much stronger than before. Thus, the speed at which he read the golden scrolls was also much faster. However, it still took him a very long time to read nearly 2,000 golden scrolls. As he continued to read, a brand new, vast and boundless world of artifact crafting began to unfold before Chinyu's eyes. Chinyu was completely immersed in the world of artifact crafting. Furthermore, he was unceasingly absorbing the experiences of his seniors. So this is the case. As he continued to read, Chinyu couldn't help but exclaim in admiration from time to time. If one was unable to enter the path of artifact crafting, one could only linger outside the door for the rest of one's life. However, once one entered the door, one would discover how vast and beautiful the world inside was. Artifact crafting, in the simplest terms, was divided into 3 steps. First step, create an artifact embryo. Second step, quenching. Third step, Spirit awakening. Among these 3 steps, the first step, create an artifact embryo, was the most difficult. An artifact embryo was actually the foundation of an artifact. If the artifact embryo was not good, then regardless of how high one's spirit awakening or quenching was, it would still be impossible for that weapon to become a treasure. If the first step was successful, then the artifact crafting would be 80% successful. Nearly 2,000 golden scrolls. Over 90% of the contents were about how to craft a good and perfect artifact embryo. The so-called artifact crafting method could even be considered as the method to craft an artifact embryo. The quality of an artifact embryo, the first prerequisite was the materials. If the materials were inferior, then no matter how high one's technique was, it would still be useless. The second prerequisite was flames. The so-called flames were not merely the strongest power of flames. After all God King level experts were capable of using void flames. Possessing void flames did not mean that one would be able to pass the test in the aspect of flames. That was because some materials did not necessarily have a high melting temperature or vaporizing temperature. Furthermore, the melting temperature of impurities was even higher than the melting temperature of the main materials. A mediocre artifact craftsman might vaporize the main materials and leave behind impurities. Thus, this was a test of one's ability to control flames. Void flames, white pure flames, and black divine flames, these 3 levels of flames must be controlled to a level of perfection. Furthermore, one must even be able to mix and use them together. One must reach a level of perfection. The third prerequisite was the ratio of materials used to craft artifacts. There were indeed many hard materials in the divine realm. However, using only one material to craft artifacts was extremely rare in the entire divine realm. Among 100 heavenly divine artifacts, 99 of them were created by combining many materials. The combination of many materials, learning from each other's strong points to make up for one's weak points, would allow the crafted artifacts to be even more perfect. There were more than a dozen different materials with different melting temperatures and different habits. One must reach a level of perfection. The requirement was extremely high. That was extremely terrifying. Even the ratio was very complicated. Because there was one thing. In the divine realm, there were not many things that were completely pure. Almost all of the materials had impurities. The only difference was the amount of impurities. A material, in the eyes of deities, might be absolutely pure. However, in the eyes of heavenly deities, they would be able to discover impurities. That was because impurities were too hard to notice. For some materials, heavenly deities were unable to discover impurities. However, God Kings were able to discover them. One must not look down on those impurities. Those impurities that occupied only a millionth of a material could possibly cause the weapon you crafted to drop by 2 or 3 grades because of that impurities. Artifact crafting was an extremely rigorous matter. One must not be careless in the slightest. This was also the reason why in the entire divine realm, even God King level experts were inferior to the craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan in terms of artifact crafting. Even Empyrean level experts were unable to craft an Empyrean spiritual treasure. However, Che-Ho Yuan dared to challenge it. From this, one could imagine how powerful his artifact crafting abilities were. There were 2 important points that one must remember. 1. Even if 2 ordinary obsidian were to be taken out, although they were both ordinary obsidian, there would definitely be some differences in the impurities between them. One must not casually use a fixed ratio to determine their quality. 2. Although the senior had given a fixed ratio, that ratio could only be used as a reference. One must not be inflexible. If one were to be inflexible and inflexible, one would at most become an ordinary artifact craftsman. In order to craft an artifact embryo, other than the 3 prerequisites mentioned above, there was also a 4th important condition: flame control. Flame control was different from the second condition, flame control. Flame control mainly depended on one's experience, observational ability, etc. Of course, these 4 were the prerequisites. With these 4 prerequisites, It could only mean that one had the potential to become a Grandmaster Artifact Craftsman. As for becoming a Grandmaster Artifact Craftsman, this was merely the beginning. In order to successfully craft an artifact embryo, the 4 prerequisites mentioned above were extremely important. After that, one must comprehend a set of methods to remove impurities and perfect the combination of different materials. This method was known as the artifact crafting method. The craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan had his own artifact crafting method. In the scrolls that the utmost East Sage Emperor had given to Qin, there were also records of many of his seniors' artifact crafting methods. Che-Ho Yuan's artifact crafting method was called 1000 Tempering 100 Refining. The name was simple. However, the process was incomparably complicated. If one wants to become the new craftsman god, one cannot copy the methods of the seniors. One must create one's own artifact crafting method that is most suitable for oneself. Che-Ho Yuan's words in the 1000 Tempering 100 Refining made Qin feel even more strongly about the difficulty of becoming a new craftsman god. I firmly believe in one thing. There is no material that is completely pure. Even if a god king thinks that it is pure, that's because the god king is unable to discover it. Even if a celestial thinks that it is pure, that's because the celestial is unable to discover it. The words spoken by the craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan in the 1000 Tempering 100 Refining had given Qin a great shock. According to the descriptions of some seniors in the scrolls that the utmost East Sage Emperor had given him, in the divine realm, although the vast majority of materials were not pure, there was still a very small number of materials that were pure. However, Che-Ho Yuan's point of view was completely opposite. There is no material that is completely pure. If you keep this in mind, it will allow you to unceasingly pursue the ultimate goal, unceasingly search for impurities. This way, in the end, you will understand how to rely on your feelings to make judgments. Remember, it's about feeling. A true Grandmaster Artificer will be able to determine how many impurities there are in a material just by relying on his feelings. What the craftsman god Che-Ho Yuan told Qin was precisely the spirit of skepticism. Regardless of what material it was, one must always have a spirit of skepticism. As he read, Qin felt more and more admiration for Che-Ho Yuan. To Qin, what was precious was not Che-Ho Yuan's artifact forging method. Instead, it was Che-Ho Yuan's unique way of thinking. The ability to draw and carve is also extremely important. This was what was recorded in the scrolls of nearly all the expert artificers. An artifact embryo. Although it was called an artifact embryo, its appearance had already reached a high level. A weapon was, in fact, a handicraft. Only when the appearance and structure of the weapon were perfect and natural would the weapon be even more powerful when it was spiritually awakened. The first step of the 3 major steps. Crafting the artifact embryo. Once all of the above steps were completed, the first step would be considered a success. As for the second and third steps, they did not sound as important as the first step. That was because the second and third steps did not test one's experience. What they tested was the conditions one could provide. This second step is truly abnormal. As Qin carefully read, he began to feel even more how difficult it was to craft artifacts. Back then, he had boasted that he had the confidence to become the new craftsman god. But now, it would seem that it was truly too difficult to realize. Chapter 566. There were 3 major steps in crafting. The first step was forming the embryo, the second step was quenching, and the third step was spirit awakening. Of the 2,000 golden scrolls, 90% of them talked about forming the embryo. The remaining 10% of them talked about quenching. As for the spirit awakening step, it only took up a very, very small part of it. The second step, quenching. It wasn't enough for a weapon to be just hard. Its toughness and flexibility were also very important. After all, hard weapons were easy to break. Quenching was to soften and toughen the weapon. And a Grandmaster Artificer could even rely on quenching to make the weapon sharper. The biggest problem with quenching was the quenching agent. The quenching agent was actually water. The quality of the water was very important. The better the water quality, the better the quenching agent. That would make the quenching of the weapon even more perfect. First essence heavy water and metal essence heavy water were both extremely rare in the divine realm. And above the metal essence heavy water, there was the frigid mist. Divine kings could have void fire because of the true flames in their bodies. But those who could have frigid mist were extremely rare. Seeing this, Qin Yu was overjoyed. My mutated magnificent lotus doppelganger formed by fusing the black lotus core and the golden bead has the unique skill of using the frigid mist domain. With this doppelganger, my quenching agent will definitely be perfect. Qin Yu became even more excited. Other divine kings, even if they were to think of a way to obtain frigid mist, how could they compare to Qin Yu's doppelganger in terms of using the frigid mist domain? The first problem with quenching was quenching agent. The second problem with quenching was controlling the temperature. Different weapons required different quenching agents. It wasn't that the colder the quenching agent was, the better. After all, some materials would freeze and crack the moment they came into contact with the frigid mist. Also, when the embryo was undergoing quenching, the control of time was also very important. How long would the quenching take? When would the quenching stop? Staying in the quenching agent for a period of time could cause the quality of the embryo to decrease. Staying in the embryo for a period of time wouldn't allow the embryo to reach the highest quality. The temperature was very important. This was a combination of experience, observation, and talent. Of the three major steps, this quenching is slightly simpler than refining artifact embryo. Qin Yu thought so in his heart. But Qin Yu had forgotten that even a god king couldn't perfectly control the frigid mist aura. Frigid mist qi was the highest quenching agent. The third step of the three major steps, spirit awakening. After going through the first two steps, even if the weapon was refined, it would at most meet the standards in terms of hardness, sharpness, and softness. However, to be worthy of being called a heavenly divine artifact, the most important thing was the spirit awakening. Although very few of the 2,000 golden scrolls recorded the art of spirit enchantment, that was because the strength of the art of spirit enchantment depended on the cultivation of the formation. By attaching an array to the weapon would become an organic whole. It would be able to perfectly control the elements of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, light, darkness, lightning, and so on. It would allow the weapon to communicate with the heavens and earth and undergo a fundamental change. This was spirit awakening. Once a weapon was spirit awakened, the final grade of the weapon would be determined. After spirit awakening, the weapon would have an amplification effect. It would allow the weapon to become a whole and its attributes would become more distinct. Furthermore, there would be special effects. For example, the sharpness special effect of the divine sword Scarlet Blood. This special effect appeared after spirit awakening. No wonder Senior Che Ho said that if one's cultivation in formations is not at the 5th level, one would definitely not be able to refine a heavenly divine artifact. At this moment, Qin Yu completely understood. If one's cultivation in formations was not at the 5th level, the spirit awakening effect would not reach the standard of a heavenly divine artifact. The standard of a heavenly divine artifact was to be able to effectively amplify the power of a heavenly god. And for ordinary divine artifacts, if one poured in the power of a heavenly god, one would be able to achieve the best amplification effect. But if one poured in the power of a heavenly god, one's attack power would at most increase by a bit. The amplification effect would instead decrease. Times in the spacious artifact forging hall, there were only 2 jade-colored cloud beds. At this moment, Qin Yu opened his eyes. The golden scrolls that were originally floating in front of him had completely disappeared. No wonder they said that a true Grandmaster artifact forging Grandmaster would definitely be a Grandmaster array Grandmaster. So this is the case. Although this spirit awakening technique is the simplest, it is also the most difficult. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Simple, the simplicity lies in the process. Difficult, the difficulty lies in the formation. I can set up a formation space. However, I am unable to set up a 5th level formation, a 6th level formation, a 7th level formation and an 8th level formation. Qin Yu laughed at himself. Qin Yu was very clear about his own cultivation in formations. Setting up a formation space relied on the spatial laws of his own universe. It did not mean that he knew how to set up a 5th level formation or a 6th level formation. However, knowing how to set up a perfect formation was already enough for him. According to what Senior Che Ho Yuan said, the pinnacle of spirit awakening is to achieve perfect harmony. His level 8 array formation was already very harmonious. However, my universe formation should have already reached the pinnacle of harmony. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, light, darkness, lightning and other elemental energies have already reached perfect harmony. A trace of a smile appeared on Qin Yu's face. This point had determined that the weapons that Qin Yu would forge would all be enchanted with the universe formation. Qin Yu floated away from the cloud bed and arrived at the center of the refining flame palace. For artifact forging, I will first forge the artifact embryo. With a thought from Qin Yu, a large pile of materials appeared at a corner of the refining flame palace. These materials were all from the bewitching god temple. Che Ho Yuan had already prepared them for his successor. There are many ways to forge an artifact embryo. How exactly should I forge an artifact embryo? Qin Yu frowned. At this moment, he recalled a sentence that Che Ho Yuan had said before: if you want to become the new craftsman god, you cannot copy the methods of your predecessors. You must create your own artifact forging method that is most suitable for you. Create your own artifact forging method? How could innovation be so simple? Of the few Grandmaster Artificers in the Divine Realm, which one of them did not experience the process of forging artifacts time and time again before finally coming to a conclusion? Forge artifacts first, then finish. First, I will test the various artifact forging methods of my predecessors one by one. Then, I will slowly search for my own path of artifact forging. Qin Yu made his decision. With a thought, from the large pile of materials at the corner of the refining flame palace, 7 materials flew to Qin Yu. Qin Yu extended one of his hands and the refining flame wristband immediately flew out. Black divine flame and white pure flame. Qin Yu began his first attempt at crafting. The method he used was the revolving wave technique of an ordinary artifact forging expert in the history of the Divine Realm. Qin Yu was very clear on this. There were extremely few Grandmaster Artificers in the Divine Realm. The main reason was that the majority of the genius artifact forging experts were obstructed in the spirit enchantment stage. No matter how good their artifact embryo was, if their cultivation in formations was insufficient, they would not be able to forge a heavenly divine artifact. If they were unable to forge a heavenly divine artifact, they would not be able to become a Grandmaster Artificer. Although the revolving wave technique was only an ordinary artifact forging expert's artifact forging method. However, Qin Yu felt that this method was not much weaker than the craftsman god Che Ho Yuan's 1000 tempering 100 refining, in terms of artifact forging. Revolving wave technique, 9 tunes flame refinement. 5th artifact forging technique, Qin Yu continued to experiment with all kinds of peculiar methods. These methods all gave Qin Yu different experiences and comprehensions, allowing Qin Yu's comprehension in artifact forging to advance by leaps and bounds. Qin Yu was completely immersed in the process. The materials used for each and every weapon were all low-grade materials. The first prerequisite for artifact embryo was materials. If the materials were too inferior, it would be impossible to forge a good weapon. However, these were, after all, things that Qin Yu was using to experiment. After more than 1,000 years had passed in the Divine Realm, when Qin Yu was the most engrossed in his experiments, Qin Yu discovered that he had actually used up all of the ordinary materials in the bewitching god temple. More than 1,000 years had passed in the Divine Realm. How long had Qin Yu been experimenting for? It was very difficult to calculate. That was because the current time acceleration in the new cosmos had reached over 5,000 times. The refining flames palace that Qin Yu was in was constantly in a state of time acceleration. Time was accelerating unceasingly. Qin Yu estimated that he ought to have been experimenting for 5 to 6 million years. Not enough materials? What should I do? Qin Yu thought with a frown. Suddenly, Qin Yu started to laugh. I've forgotten. The utmost East Sage Emperor had already instructed me that I can ask him for materials if I don't have enough. Qin Yu immediately sent a voice transmission to Qiuzhong Fu, telling Qiuzhong Fu to personally go and retrieve a large amount of ordinary materials. It would seem that I'll have to return to the misty mystic palace. Qin Yu muttered to himself. Qin Yu was suddenly startled. I've reached the high-level heavenly deity level? In the past several million years, Qin Yu had been completely immersed in artifact crafting and had not noticed that he had reached the high-level heavenly deity level. In the past several million years, Qin Yu's magnificent lotus clone had been comprehending the spatial comprehensions left behind by Zhuo Qiumei the entire time. In the past several million years, the magnificent lotus clone had comprehended half of the spatial comprehensions that Qin Yu had left behind for his clone. The half of the spatial comprehensions that Qin Yu had left behind for his clone was also a quarter of the total spatial comprehensions that Zhuo Qiumei had left behind for Qin Yu. Qin Yu and Li Er had both obtained half of Zhuo Qiumei's spatial comprehensions. In reality, the magnificent lotus clone had only comprehended an eighth of the spatial laws. With merely this bit of spatial laws, Qin Yu had actually managed to reach the threshold of the high-level heavenly deity level. From this, it could be seen that there was an enormous gap between a new high-level heavenly deity and a peak high-level heavenly deity. Li Er's comprehension speed is a bit slower than my clone's. She is currently still at the peak of the mid-level heavenly deity level. Qin Yu had already determined this with a single glance at Li Er. The magnificent lotus clone's soul was comparable to that of a high-level heavenly deity. Thus, his comprehension speed was extremely fast. I shall not disturb Li Er anymore. Qin Yu lightly nodded. Then, he disappeared from the artifact crafting palace. At the summit of the East Hazy Mountain, the cyan-gowned Qin Yu's clone was currently sitting cross-legged. This clone had been quietly comprehending the spatial laws left behind by Zhuo Qiumei the entire time. What his clone had comprehended, Qin Yu's true body had naturally also comprehended. The cyan-gowned Qin Yu's clone suddenly opened his eyes. He said, "True body." Qin Yu lightly nodded. With an intention, the final lump of 7-colored radiance in his mind directly flew into the mind of Qin Yu's clone and assimilated into it. You can continue with your training. After Qin Yu finished saying those words, he left the new cosmos and returned to the wood mansion. Qin Yu currently did not have the time to comprehend the spatial laws. Thus, the task of comprehending the spatial laws was left to his clone. After all, the path of artifact crafting was truly time-consuming. After several million years, Qin Yu had only managed to accumulate some experience. Of course, if Qin Yu were to create an artifact crafting method right now, Qin Yu was also capable of doing so. However, Qin Yu strived for perfection. Qin Yu had decided to do more experiments, accumulate more experience, and comprehend more before creating an artifact crafting method. Times in a garden behind the utmost East Sage Emperor's palace. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu was currently chatting with his wife. Your Majesty Sage Emperor, the people from the misty mystic palace have come to collect the artifact crafting materials. A tall, thin and ice-cold woman said respectfully. The majority of the materials are ordinary materials. Only a small portion of them are slightly more precious. Merely, the amount is extremely large. The utmost East Sage Emperor Huang Fu Yu was immediately overjoyed. Haha, he's finally started crafting artifacts. Good, the larger the amount, the better. He wants a lot of ordinary materials. It seems that he's currently experimenting and accumulating experience. The refinement of an artifact by someone whose cultivation in the field of formations surpasses that of Cheho Yuan's is truly worth looking forward to. The utmost East Sage Emperor was very happy. That tall, thin, and ice-cold woman suddenly had an awkward expression on her face. "Your Majesty, Sage Emperor, the amount is too large. All of the ordinary materials in our storage have been emptied." "Emptied?" The utmost East Sage Emperor Huangfu Yu was stunned. "This Qin Yu, he's able to use them all?" Qin Yu brought back a large amount of spatial materials and then returned to the wood mansion with Jiang Lan. He once again entered the new cosmos and began to train. Currently, the new cosmos time acceleration had already reached over 5,000 times. Qin Yu possessed ample time to experiment. Inside the artifact crafting palace, Qin Yu had once again started crafting artifacts. With sufficient materials, Qin Yu began to experiment without any worries. In this vast amount of experiments, an unprecedented artifact crafting method that gathered the experience of numerous artifact crafting experts was gradually taking shape. Time was passing. Qin Yu, who was immersed in artifact crafting, was unable to sense the passage of time. There was not a single weapon in the artifact crafting palace. Where were the weapons that Qin Yu had experimented with in these years? Although they were all inferior materials, Qin Yu's tempering and spirit awakening techniques were still extremely powerful. The weapons that he crafted were also not inferior. Outside of the bewitching God Temple, on the East Hazy Mountain. In the entire mountain forest of the East Hazy Mountain, weapons were scattered all over the place like trash. The amount was so great that it could definitely be counted in the tens of thousands. Even the worst weapons were divine artifacts. There were even low-quality heavenly divine artifacts. These were Qin Yu's vast amount of experimental products. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.